Good evening, everyone. Lovely to see a packed gallery. Let's make a start. My name's Patrick Hall. I'm the Mayor of the City of Canning. It's just after 6 p.m, 6:02 p.m. On Tuesday, the 21st of September 2021, and welcome to the City of Canning's September Ordinary Council meeting. We've got a bit to get through tonight, and sorry again for the late start. At item 1, declaration of opening announcements and of visitors and disclaimer. I declare the Ordinary Council meeting open. Of course, we acknowledge the Whadjuk people, the traditional custodians of the land, and pay our respects to elders both past and present. May I ask everybody present to please turn off electronic devices, including mobile phones, iPads and tablets for the duration of the meeting, as these devices may interfere with our audio recording equipment. This meeting is being live streamed on the City's website. By being present at this meeting, members of the public consent to the possibility that their voice is being live streamed to the public if you speak. The remainder of the disclaimer can be seen on screen. I'd like to sincerely welcome on behalf of the City of Canning Council, Shire President Anthony Middleton, CEO Steve Harding, and councillors of the Shire of East Pilbara. Welcome. We just had a very brief reception to meet you all. I very much hope that you enjoy tonight's proceedings. And the councillors are here for the Walga conference, which has been held over the last couple of days. Attendances at item 2, apologies, there are none. I'm pleased to see the full council here tonight. Thank you, councillors. Approved leave of absence at item 2.2, there are none. Disclosures of interest, CEO, I'll ask you to read disclosures of interest if there are any at item 3.2.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. We have a declaration of impartiality received from Councillor Barry tonight in respect of item CD 029-21, and that will be read at the appropriate point in the meeting.
Thank you. At item 4, announcements by the presiding member without discussion. I'd just like to acknowledge the City's Ranger and Community Safety team for winning the WA Ranger Team of the Year award, which is a wonderful and prestigious award, and that recognises their dedication to providing a 24/7 service for our entire community. So I think the entire community should be very proud of our Ranger services and the officers who are responsible for providing that service. So my personal thanks. I'm very proud of our Rangers, and so should the community be. I wanted to read a short prepared statement. Thank you for the round of applause. I wanted to read a prepared statement to the meeting, just to clear up a matter that was raised recently in the media. Under the heading Setting the Record Straight, on 27th of August 2021, the Chief Executive Officer of the City of Canning, in an unprecedented move, was forced to issue a public media statement in response to misinformation being spread widely in the community. The misinformation related to false claims printed in the Western Australian newspaper and also published extensively across 7 West's online platform that I had hired a private investigator to discredit Deputy Mayor Jesse Jacobs. The headline of the article being Deputy Mayor Jesse Jacobs claims Mayor Patrick Hall hired private detective to discredit him. The City's media statement reads, on the 26th of August 2021, the Western Australian newspaper published an article concerning the management of a complaint dealt with by the City of Canning. The article contained a claim that Mayor Patrick Hall had authorised actions in relation to that investigation. Under the Local Government Act, a mayor or councillor is not authorised to initiate investigations nor to directly authorise expenditure on any such matter. The Act has specific prohibitions preventing any elected member, including a mayor, from being involved with local government administrative matters. The actions on this matter were commissioned by the City's former Chief Executive Officer, Mr Arthur Chiron. At no stage has any of the City's elected members been directly involved with the administration of this matter. And just for the record, a mayor has no authority to hire an investigator, nor does a mayor have funds at his disposal to do so. I did not, have not, and have never hired a private investigator. The hiring of an investigator where necessary is an administrative function, and it's an action that may only be authorised by a CEO. It's actually unlawful under the provisions of the Local Government Act for any elected member, including a mayor, to interfere in the City's administration. I have absolutely no involvement in this matter at any level, and it would be unlawful for me to have done so. This is a time when this council needs unity, not division, when we should be focusing on our community and not ourselves. It's a moment in our history when we should be working together to restore this council's reputation in the local government sector, and that's in the face of an investigation by the Corruption and Crime Commission, not further damage it. The purpose of this announcement is to set the record straight, to correct the blatant mistruths that have been intentionally circulated in this community and unfortunately statewide, to defend my own reputation and to have my position on this matter recorded on the public record. I'll say no further on the matter. Let me see, reports of delegates without discussion. Do any elected members wish to present a delegate's report at item 5? No, thank you. We'll move on to item 6. Question time for the public. Response to previous questions taken on notice, there are none. Question time for the public at item 6.2 on tonight's agenda. I open question time now at, by my recollection, about 6:08 p.m. The time set aside for public question time is 15 minutes. For recording purposes, please state your name and address and then proceed to ask your question. If an answer cannot be provided at tonight's meeting, the question will be taken on notice and an answer will be provided at the next ordinary council meeting, which will be October. In accordance with policy AD02, members of the public who have registered their questions with the City's administration shall be called upon in the order in which registrations were received. Written questions will precede verbal question. The City has received questions for tonight's meeting from Mrs. Karen Barbara. Mrs. Barbara, are you present? No, I may just ask the CEO to read those questions to the gallery, to the meeting.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. The first question is the position of Mayor paid for by the City of Canning. The response, elected members are not employees of the City of Canning. The allowance they are paid are not deemed to be salary in the same way as the City's employees. The Local Government Act provides for allowances and meeting attendance fees for all elected members. Each year, the Salaries and Allowance Tribunal sets a range of allowances and meeting fees for every local government. Council then makes a decision each year on what amount within that range the elected member will receive. Question 2. If so, why is the City of Canning openly endorsing some candidates in the upcoming election and others not? The response, the City of Canning itself does not endorse candidates at any election. However, it is open to an elected member to have the right to express their personal views in relation to candidates, given that statements are A, factual, not misleading, and do not defame any other candidate. A council does not have the power to prevent the actions of endorsement by any individual, even if that individual is an elected member.
Thank you, CEO. Are there any other further questions from members of the public? Please come forward.
Good evening, Mr Mayor, councillors, Acting CEO Kane, directors and those in the public gallery. I'm sorry my printer failed just before and I've been reading it off my phone. My first question is...
I'll just ask you to introduce yourself to the meeting.
Oh, sorry, Marnie Aldridge, and I live in Minota Avenue, Shelley. Last week I actually asked for an e-petition requesting that the councillor positions, titles and positions entitled the Mayor cannot be used to promote or endorse council. And that e-petition was actually refused as being unlawful. But so on the weekend I quickly scrambled and I actually wrote a written petition with a small change that says the Mayor was not to use his title, etc. And it was actually put in yesterday and was accepted today, but unfortunately be in the October OCM. So if I can actually, my question is, if I can actually have that wording in a written petition, why can't I have it in an e-petition?
CEO.
Thank you, Mr Mayor, and I believe Ms Aldridge, Mrs Aldridge is a subject of your deputation tonight?
Yes, it is.
Okay, I can make my comments now or wait till after your deputation, but perhaps if I do so now. The City's e-petition system was developed to facilitate making of petitions that could be considered by Council, with subsequent action resolved by way of a Council decision. In doing so, Council has to possess the necessary statutory authority under the Local Government Act in order to undertake the decision-making on such matters. Where the matter falls outside of the authority, receipt of a petition seeking Council's decision could only be followed by a recommendation to either take no action or reject the petition. The language on the City's webpage makes clear that the use of the e-petition system must be for a matter that falls within Council's remit. The system was not established to query opinion or belief. It must relate to the capacity for Council to take action. The advice provided was that matters possessed in the e-petition did not fall within the remit of the Local Government Act. The implied right of free speech cannot be constrained by a decision of council. The propositions that are contained in the petition, that is, that there are issues relating to titles, which we mentioned later tonight, are misconceived as being within the power of council to initiate decision-making. This is just not the case. The city does not own the title of councillor, deputy mayor or mayor. These are gained by individuals through the act of election to office, either at the ballot box or, in the case of the deputy mayor, by ballot at council and council decision. The number of councillors and the way the mayor is elected are also not matters that fall within the jurisdiction of council. We couldn't tonight, by way of petition, suddenly increase the number of councillors, nor could we declare any staff member to be given the title of council. These are matters that come under the authority of the Minister for Local Government, acting on the advice of the Local Government Advisory Board. The resources of a local government are ones that can be assigned or reassigned by the local government through the decision of council. Council simply has no decision-making power to confer a title earned through election onto any individual. The title mayor, deputy mayor and councillor are not direct resources owned by the City of Canning.
Mrs Aldridge, your second
Sorry,
question?
but to clarify, my question was, I had a written petition. Can
This
I
is
now
your
use
second
the
question.
same?
I
No, I'm
think
sorry,
this-
this is to clarify because the question wasn't actually answered. I actually said I had a written petition with this prayer. Can I now use that exact same one as an e-petition?
The CEO's just answered your question, Mrs Aldridge.
No, I'm
What's
sorry,
your
you
second
didn't,
question?
because it was a completely
This is not a
different petition.
conversation. You're here to ask a question. You've asked a question. I'm ruling that your question was answered. Your second question, Mrs Aldridge?
Okay, so this is a question that was spur of the moment because of what statements were made earlier. So to you, Mr Mayor, so you are categorically stating that you did not or were not the complainant or any way regarded as the complainant that led to the CEO Kyron to do the investigator?
You were just listening to the statement I made. I think it was unequivocal. I also finished by saying I'll say nothing more on the matter and it'd be improper
So you
for me
weren't
to
the
do it.
complainant that led to this?
I'm not having a conversation with you about this, Mrs Aldridge. If you have a question, ask it. You've just asked it. I've just read a 5-minute statement that was patently clear on my position there. I'm not certain what else you would like from me, but I can't be any clearer than that. I'm trying to be as fair as I can to you, but surely you heard what I just read.
Okay, let's move on then. Okay,
This is your final question.
Final
What is it?
question, because I know it's down to 3. To the Mayor, when you were endorsing and promoting your candidates, can I ask who approached who? Did you approach the candidates or that you promoted, or did they approach you?
Yeah, I'm ruling that out of order. I'm not answering that question. It's irrelevant. Thank you, Mrs
Okay.
Aldridge.
Thank you.
Any further questions from the gallery this evening? Oh, Mr Aldridge.
Yeah, firstly, I'd just like to draw attention to 4.5. It's 3, it's Part C, where necessary information is available at the time of the question.
What 4.53
Of the standing,
of what,
of the
Mr.
standing
Aldridge?
order, of your standing orders.
Would you like to introduce yourself to the meeting?
Yes, my name is Richard Aldridge, 5 Minota Avenue in Shelley. So where the necessary information is available at the time of the question is asked, a response must be provided. I believe that you had the information from my wife's last question and you ruled it out of order for convenience.
What's your question, Mr Aldridge?
My first question is, has the Mayor of the City of Canning, Mr Patrick Hall, ever made a CM 101 complaint?
Have I ever made a complaint?
Under policy CM 101.
Do you understand the rules of conduct for local government members, for elected members? Did you know it's a breach of the Local Government Act actually even to say that you've actually made a complaint? And I'm talking about minor breaches, but did you know that that's actually a breach of a law? I'm asking you a question. I'm ruling it out of order.
I don't agree with your interpretation of the Act.
Yeah, well,
There you go.
I'm not sure where you study law, Mr Aldridge, but I certainly have not. But I can tell you I have a fairly full understanding of my obligations. I'm ruling your question out of order. Move on. Second question.
Okay, does the Mayor admit on the public record that he is actively canvassing for some candidates in the upcoming election but not for others?
The CEO has just responded to this. Mr. Aldridge, you and Mrs. Aldridge can make this as salacious as you would like. You can make all the allegations you would like to make, but I think the Electoral Commission themselves, the Department of Local Government and our CEO this evening has made it patently clear that there is no offence or no malintent by a mayor or any other elected member of local government in endorsing any candidate, as long as they do so without disadvantaging another one or diminishing another one publicly. So I can have an opinion on certain candidates, absolutely. My role here as a mayor is to identify people within the community that I feel may be wonderful members of this council. And if I choose to encourage them to run for council, and if I then choose to actually endorse them, I will do so. Previously to this, in 2019, I endorsed a number of candidates, including Councillor Kunza. Councillor Kunza, who was running at that time, endorsed me. I've endorsed Councillor Amanda Spencer-Teo. In 2019, Councillor Barry himself endorsed Megan O'Donnell, who was a former member of council. The endorsement's still on his Facebook page from October the 2nd in 2019. So I'm not absolutely certain why I'm being chosen or picked out here to throw barbs out. I'd ask you to stop. I don't think it's in the best interest of good governance. You've had your question. You've had an answer from the CEO. I've now been as frank as I possibly can. Your third question.
When the City of Canning Mayor signs an electoral pamphlet, the Mayor of the City of Canning, how is the electorate supposed to know that that isn't from the City of Canning, or it's not the City of Canning's position when it's signed Mayor of the City of Canning? Mr. CEO.
I think we've made this as patently clear as we possibly can, Mr. Aldridge. Your failure to understand what you've been told tonight is not a problem that is mine. I am ruling the question out of order. I won't be responding to it. I think people are clever enough to understand what has been said tonight on the public record, that it is not improper for any councillor or indeed a mayor to endorse a candidate.
I'm sorry, you misunderstood the question. I'm
no,
not saying it's improper.
I was actually. Over me. I call you to order. Prevention of a disturbance at item 5.3. Person addressing the council must be courteous and respectful. You're not being courteous. You're not being respectful. I'm asking you to sit down. Question time is over. Thank you. Are there any other questions from the floor? Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. We'll close public question time now at 20 minutes past 6 p.m. We move to item 7, which is the confirmation of minutes. The recommendation is that the minutes of the ordinary council meeting held on the 17th of August 2021 be confirmed as circulated. The recommendation is on page 2 of the agenda and is on screen. Can I have a mover, please, councillors? Councillor Kunza, thank you, and Councillor Jacobs, Deputy Mayor Jacobs is the seconder. Thank you. We'll put the matter to the vote.
The motion to confirm the OCM minutes from August 2021 has been carried unanimously, 11 in favour.
Thank you. At item 8.1, petitions, there are none. 8.2, presentations, there are none. Item 8.3, deputations. A deputation has been approved by Mr Thor Kerr regarding the protection of the conservation category wetland and threatened ecological community. Mr Kerr, would you like to please come forward? You have up to 10 minutes, Mr Kerr. I'll give you a warning if you get close to that time.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Kaya Nyankwel Tor. My name's Tor Kerr. I live at 38 Rivermore Loop, Riverton, and I acknowledge we gather on Whadjuk Noongar country and pay my respects to their elders, past and present. I'd also like to acknowledge their careful study and management of the biodiversity of this region that I and other residents in the City of Canning have come to enjoy. For more than 40,000 years, they have shown how sustainability can be done. I thank the dedicated members of the community who have volunteered their time and labour under rain and baking sun to plant, collect rubbish, water, weed and protect the remaining ecosystem that has survived really ignorant and short-term thinking, which has really been emblematic of colonisation and colonial governance. Hopefully we're getting beyond that though. I thank the city's staff and councillors who have heeded lessons taught by Noongar people and the advocacy of informed defenders of the rich ecosystems around the Jalgara-Billia or Canning River. As a local resident and ratepayer, I thank Councillor Sabiri for bringing today's motion to forego grant allocations and remove funding for the Southern Link Road project in the Canning City Centre. Councillors, by voting for this motion, you will save the city $2 million this year. Voting for this motion will prevent further incursion and pollution of a unique threatened ecological community and conservation category wetland in the Cannington Claypan. Voting for this motion will reduce wastage in Main Road's budget as well, particularly given the $475 million allocated this year to level crossing removal on the Armidale train line, including the crossings at Hamilton Street and Wharf Street in this year's budget. The William Street crossing is also due for removal with the new Beckenham train station. So voting for this motion will demonstrate your awareness that the Cannington Claypan is one of a kind in the metro area. It will demonstrate your respect for the city's local biodiversity strategy and your understanding of the importance of protecting this site in the context of the threatened ecological community wetland systems. I thank the councillors for hearing my deputation. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr Kurt. And deputation has been approved for Sian Mawson this evening regarding, I think, the same report. That's not as a motion 010 of 21, which is titled Foregoing of Grant Allocations and Removal of Funding for Southern Link Road Project in Canning City Centre. Sian, please come forward, introduce yourself. You are forward. Introduce yourself to the meeting and make your deputation. Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Sian Mawson from 86 Gibb Street, East Cannington. Tonight I want to talk about item NOM-10-21, foregoing of grant allocations and removal of funding for Southern Link Road project in Canning City Centre. Southern Link Road Stage 3 is proposed to join Gerard Street to Grey Street, Cannington. In doing so, some of the Cannington Claypan, a threatened ecological community, will be cleared. We hear the term Threatened Ecological Community, or TEC, or TEC, a lot, but do we really know what it means? Let's start with the word community. In human terms, a community is all of the people that live in the same area as us and with whom we interact. We may see these people regularly, like our neighbours, workmates or shopkeepers, or less frequently, like the emergency services, doctor or plumber. These people make up our community and help our personal world keep turning. An ecological community is a community that, instead of being made up of humans, includes all of the other life forms in an area. The Department of Biodiversity, Conservation and Attractions describes it thus. An ecological community is a naturally occurring group of plants, animals and other organisms interacting in a unique habitat. The complex range of interactions between the component species provides an important level of biological diversity in addition to genetics and species. So the plants, animals and other organisms, including fungi and bacteria, found in an area make up an ecological community. The differences between different ecological community types are influenced by a number of external forces. For example, wet areas will have a different community to dry areas because different plants and animals have evolved to tolerate different conditions. But the external force may be much more subtle than that and may be invisible, such as different soil types or where the depth of groundwater varies. Then we come to the word threatened. I know what it's like when I feel threatened, but what does it mean for an ecological community? In this context, the word threatened means that the ecological community is at risk of becoming totally destroyed. To complicate matters a bit further, there are different categories within the definition of the word threatened, depending on how close the ecological community is to becoming totally destroyed. The Cannington Claypan is classified as containing several ecological community types two of which are threatened ecological communities. One, based on soil type, is listed as being endangered, and the other, based on the vegetation, as being critically endangered. Okay, so what does endangered and critically endangered mean? As mentioned earlier, there are different categories within the definition of the word threatened, depending on how close the ecological community is to becoming totally destroyed. These are presumed totally destroyed, critically endangered, endangered, and vulnerable. As you can see, the ecological community that is the Cannington clay pan, being classified in part as critically endangered, is only one step away from becoming totally destroyed. I won't read out the full definition of critically endangered, but the consistent theme through it all is that there's less than 10% of that type of ecological community left, and if things keep going the way they have been, it is expected that the ecological community will be totally destroyed in approximately 10 years. The classification of endangered is not much better. For this classification, there needs to be less than 30% of that type of ecological community remaining, and it is expected to become totally destroyed in 20 years. And the term destroyed has its own definition too. An ecological community doesn't need to be wiped from the earth to be considered totally destroyed. It just needs to be modified such that re-establishment of ecological processes, species composition and community structure within the range of variability exhibited by the original community is unlikely within the foreseeable future, even with positive human intervention. To help us understand what that means, let's look at a small country town. This town is its own community. We have some farmers, a petrol station, a school, grocery store, and the residents. A nice little human community. Now let's see what happens when Farmer Joe decides to sell up. Farmer Joe is lucky and is able to sell his property to his neighbour, Old MacDonald. Farmer Joe and his family then leave the district. But now, with fewer children in the area, the school has to close. That leads to other families leaving the town so that their kids are close to a school. With fewer customers, the grocery store closes. Although the town still exists, it is no longer able to support the needs of the community. And the same thing happens in an ecological community. The lives of all of the plants and animals are so intertwined that one small action can cause the whole community to collapse. To the casual observer, it will appear that everything is well, but those plants or animals that rely totally upon another species can be put in peril should something upset the balance. Now let's get back to the Cannington clay pan. The local biodiversity strategy tells us that the ecological community that in this city is now found only at the Cannington clay pan used to cover 305 hectares. In 2018, there were only 6.2 hectares left. That means that we have already lost more than 97% of this type of ecological community. The city contends that most of the land to be impacted by the road is classified as degraded or completely degraded. What isn't mentioned is that clay pans and wetlands are some of the easiest ecological communities to recover. So, what is presented as not worth saving because it is degraded is, in the eyes of an experienced land care worker, easily recoverable. Control the weeds and clay pans practically regenerate themselves. Another contention is that we should wait for the EPA decision as they are best placed to determine the environmental impacts. And we should hear from the experts. The EPA are experts in their field. It's just that their field of expertise is in applying the legislation. I would argue that the environmental experts are here in the gallery. Collectively, we have hundreds of years of experience in caring for the land. We eat, breathe and sleep the rehabilitation and regeneration of degraded native vegetation. And we say that allowing this road to be built is environmental vandalism. There is a chance that the city would gain management of the majority of the clay pan. That would be great, but it is not guaranteed. The only thing that is guaranteed is that to allow this road to be built would result in further damage to an environment that is already suffering. We know that it is classified as containing ecological communities that are endangered and critically endangered. And from what we discussed earlier, critically endangered is just one step away from being totally destroyed. And we know that being totally destroyed relates to the function of the whole community, not how much vegetation is still left. Ecological communities have been destroyed since Europeans arrived in Australia. That previous destruction can be excused as it was done through ignorance. However, today we know exactly what we are doing and what we risk losing. Constructing the Southern Link Road will have a permanent impact on the clay pan. If it doesn't result in the ecological community being totally destroyed, it will at the very least push it that little bit closer to the edge. Tonight, I hope we can give real meaning to the words threatened ecological community. And thank you for your time.
Thank you very much, Sian. Thank you for coming down. Thank you. Just for the interest of those in the gallery, I've been asked to bring that matter forward. I will bring the matter forward, just so staff are aware. We'll do that a little bit later on. We have a third deputation, Mrs. Marnie Aldridge again. We have a deputation regarding e-petitions. Mrs. Aldridge.
Sit down. Okay, good evening, Mr Mayor, councillors, Acting CEO Kane, directors and those in the public gallery. My name is Marnie Aldridge and I live at Minota Avenue in Shelley. Tonight I'll be doing my deputation on e-petition and the importance of these e-petitions as a form of communication between the community and council. Firstly, I want to make it very clear from the start that these are my opinions, as I would not like to put my family through another concerns notice and a threat of defamation if someone here doesn't agree with me tonight. At last week's agenda meeting, it was stated that the City of Canning values community feedback engagement. Well, having my e-petition rejected last week, this seems to say otherwise. Over the past week on social media platforms, there's been a lot of feedback regarding the Mayor's involvement with endorsing and promoting candidates for the upcoming elections. I wanted to submit an e-petition tonight so the council could see that they could note the wishes of myself and other fellow citizens who believe that the upcoming elections should be fair and equal and that present councillors and the Mayor should not be involved in any way and remain impartial with the elections. So a little background on my e-petition and the other written petition process. I submitted my e-petition late last Monday afternoon around 5 p.m. for a week-long petition ending Sunday night. I was then hoping to submit it first thing the following Monday morning or yesterday. So it would give ample time for governance to verify the petitions in order for it to be presented for tonight's OCM. It took the administration until Wednesday afternoon to reply that the City advises that it's unable to progress your request for an e-petition as the substance of this seeks to initiate actions and outcomes would be unlawful. So I thought that maybe the wording or the intent was unclear, so I rewrote and resubmitted the e-petition again. It was reiterated that it wasn't about the Mayor's individual rights being compromised. We are not after about your individual right. When Thursday night, the e-petition was rejected again, and I quote from the CEO that the substance of what you are requesting from the council is unlawful. So no explanation was given, except for it was unlawful. So without any idea of what or how it's unlawful, what I do understand is that this sets a precedent where citizens can be denied a valid and common form of communication to their council through petition. The first issue is whether council accepting a petition is the role of council or the administration. We know petitions are addressed to the council and that the council votes every month to accept or reject petitions. Also that these petitions are noted and, as my experience shows, very rarely actioned in my experience. If all the terms and conditions of the e-petition platform were followed and it's suitable for publication, then surely the administration doesn't have the right to reject a valid petition. So let's look at the prayer. It was put automatically on before all the e-petitions. We, being the citizens of City of Canning, hereby petition that the council will take note of the wishes of the insofar the citizens insofar as we request. How can the council taking note of the wishes of citizens be unlawful? The content of the petition only needs to be noted by the council. It's neither illegal, in my opinion, or outside the jurisdiction of council. The petition is really no more than an official means of communicating between a group of citizens and the decision-making body of the local government. I didn't think council noticed such communications as breaking the law. The communication was not denied because it was rude, contained hate speech, was defamatory, or adhered to the terms and conditions. So I was confused as to why it was denied. The only reason I can think of is that the potential communication being made by citizens to the council was unwanted by the administration and by some on council. So let's look further at petition. We, the citizens, wish council to note that the positions and the title of mayor are not to be used to promote or endorse council candidates in the upcoming council elections. First, it's important to note that the petition is not asking individuals that they can't endorse or promote candidates Of course you can. You are able to do that. This is not what it's about. We consider it unlawful if we ask them to stop. But this was not the case, and it's been stated again and again. You have the individual right. The petition clearly states that individuals should not use their titles and positions while doing so. We have said many, many times that Mr Patrick Hall can endorse and promote whoever he wants as an individual and state as Mr Patrick Hall. But while acting in the office of the Mayor of the City of Canning or representing City of Canning, in my opinion, he should refrain from doing so. The public can tell the difference between a statement made in the official position of the Mayor of the City of Canning and an individual through the use of the title. Signing a document, the Mayor of the City of Canning and the City of Canning Mayor, inherently implies that the document is signed in an official capacity and not as a private individual. Now, the e-petition would allow the community to express their views via the e-petition. When the Mayor of the City of Canning signs a flyer stating, "I endorse candidate X" for the public, could quite fairly assume that he's doing so in his capacity as a spokesman of the City of Canning. Deliberately confusing the electorate into believing the local government is endorsing or promoting a candidate can be seen, in my opinion, as unfair.
I'll just hold you up there. I'll just ask you to be respectful. Don't claim that I'm deliberately misleading.
Okay,
I will ask you to
refuse
take a
that.
seat, Mrs Aldridge. So I'm putting up with this for the next 5 minutes, I expect. You clearly didn't listen to what the CEO's advice was earlier. Or
I
you didn't
didn't hear that
understand
until I wrote my petition.
Please don't speak over me when I'm speaking, Mrs Aldridge. But I will ask you to show some respect, as much as you could probably give me. But please don't accuse me of misleading, because I'm not. So continue, but choose your words carefully. Thank you.
I don't know what I wrote now. Supporting one candidate and not the others in the role could be seen as detrimental to other candidates. The election is a competitive and there's only a fixed number of votes. 4 out of the 23 candidates, 4, and 1 from each ward, have the golden ticket of the Mayor's backing. To make this an easy to understand with a similar example, I'm in education, so many schools recently have been involved in their sport carnivals. Let's say that your child's about to run in a race. There are 8 runners. However, one child gets chosen by the principal to get a 20-metre head start in front of the others. I can't imagine anyone there would think that this is fair, equal or ethical. I know myself and others would question this action. Anyone there could see that this would be detrimental to the other children running in that race. Yes, it's a simple example of our election situation. Now, it's been stated that while the Department of Local Government has stated supporting candidates is not inherently proper, they have also determined that causing detriment to a candidate is an improper use of office. One candidate being advanced does make me question whether the others are being disadvantaged or have been caused detriment. I'm sorry, but stating that others have done it or have done it in the past does not make it okay. I'm sorry, it doesn't rule with as a mum. I don't understand how well other people have done it. Well, I can do it now. I believe that the public aren't worried about the code of conduct, but they're pretty switched on when it comes to being fair. Residents are left wondering, what favour does the candidate owe the Mayor of the City of Canning? And is this the start of a voting bloc? How is the Mayor actively promoting and endorsing other candidates? And how is it not awkward or detrimental to those currently on council seeking re-election? You stated that the candidates will do a great job. So are the imputations that the current councillors aren't? This deputation is about the right of citizens to communicate through an e-petition with their council. There are lots of people who feel that the Mayor's endorsing and promoting candidates is unfair and that the council members should remain impartial and removed from elections. I wanted to bring this to the attention of the council so it could be noted in the official record. However, my e-petition has been refused by the administration. I know the Mayor would like to believe it's just our interpretation. It's the Aldridge, that's all they believe, and it's not a concern, and everyone in the public. But I'm sorry, more and more people agree with us, and the local government elections should be impartial and independent of any interference. It appears that the administration is now able to decide whether to accept petitions or block emails to councillors. I'm concerned that more and more power is slipping from the elected members to the administration and CEO. One of these issues included the complaint process. Deciding if a complaint is vexatious should be a decision made by council. I reiterate the importance that safeguards are put in place so that all complaints are heard equally and fairly. The City of Canning and its staff should be totally impartial during elections, and the spokesman of the city must allow ratepayers to choose who they want to represent them. I'd like the council to please advocate and allow my e-petition to be uploaded so the community can have their voice. Thank you very much.
CEO, it's patently clear to me that the advice provided to you earlier by Mrs Aldridge either was perhaps misconstrued or misunderstood. Could you read again to the meeting the advice you provided earlier? Mrs Aldridge is under the belief that we have no valid reason for not allowing the petition to proceed. Could you please again tell her why?
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I can restate the advice I provided, perhaps also reference section 1.32 of the Local Government Act, where the Act itself is supposed to result in, and the administration of local government, more efficient and effective local government. Part of the effectiveness of local government deals with the use of local government systems and resources. So the e-petition system, which is initiated through resolution of council, as I understand, was to develop to facilitate decision-making on decisions that could be undertaken or considered by council, with subsequent action resolved by way of a council decision. I just cross-reference then, Mr Mayor, specifically in the Standing Orders section 4.73, the result of council is simply they can receive the petition or the petition be rejected, petition be received and report prepared by council, petition be received and referred to CFE action. If a petition cannot be received and referred to CFE action because it's outside the rules of the remit of the local government, it's not a good use of the local government resources to try and progress such petitions. So in doing so, council has to ensure the necessary statutory authority exists under the Local Government Act in order to undertake such decision making. So where the matter falls outside the authority of such act, the receipt of a petition through the petition system would simply be followed by a rejection, by a recommendation from the staff, with all the staff resources used to put that through the administration to say that the matter be rejected. The language on the city's webpage makes clear the e-petition system must be for a matter that falls within the council's remit, not about the belief or opinion of an individual or a group of persons. It must relate in a capacity for the council to take action. If a petition is handed in hard form and presented in accordance with the standing orders, that similarly seeks the council to do something which it doesn't have the authority to do, the only thing that the administration could do is recommend the petition be rejected. So I said the propositions presented in the e-petition were misconceived. As I said earlier tonight, the city does not own the titles of council, deputy mayor or mayor. They are gained through the Local Government Act, and I can quote the sections if you wish, through an act of election to office at the ballot paper, or as I mentioned in the case of a deputy mayor through a decision of council. One thing to understand, a councillor once elected has that title full stop. Councillor Holland, sitting here looking very erudite tonight, is always Councillor Holland. He cannot be just Mr Holland. From the local government's perspective, he is always considered to be Councillor Holland. So the number of councillors, the way we manage the councils, all don't fall within the jurisdiction of the council. These come under the authority of the minister and through acting on advice of the Local Government Advisory Board. So as I said earlier on, the resources of a local government are ones that could be assigned or reassigned. So not I or any member of the staff here has authority to confer a title on anybody else other than what the community do through election. So where your proposition is that these are used, that there is a use of the title, that are resources of the City of Canning, that is just simply not the case.
Okay, so why did my written petition get through?
This is not a conversation, Mrs Aldridge.
But this is a deputation. Surely
Mrs.
we can have
Aldridge, you're out
questions
of
back and
order.
forth.
I'll
We
ask you
used to do
take
this
your
years
seat.
ago, and now we
sorry
can't.
I'm sorry the information provided by the CEO doesn't suit your agenda, but you're out of order. I'm asking you to go back to your seat.
Quite shocked. But can I just quickly...
Mrs Aldridge, under section 5.32 of the Standing Orders, after a person addressing the council must be courteous and respectful to the council and the processes under which it operates and must comply with any direction of the presiding officer. You did not do so. I'm directing you to please leave the meeting.
You want me to leave?
I'm asking you to leave the meeting. I'll ask you to leave the meeting, Mrs Aldridge, please. Sorry for the interruption to those and to our guests here tonight. We will continue. Applications to leave at item 9. There are none this evening. At item 10, questions by members of which due notice has been given without discussion. There are none at item 10 this evening. Items brought forward for the convenience of those in the public gallery. I have been asked, and as I alluded to earlier, I will have made the decision to bring forward notice of motion 010 of 21. The title of that report is Foregoing of Grant Allocations and Removal of Funding for Southern Link Road Project in Canning City Centre. I believe that the responsible officer is Director Bride. The item is on page 196 of the agenda, and because of the size of it, we can't have all of it on screen, but some of it certainly is on screen. Councillor Sabiri, you're moving the motion, I believe. Can I have a seconder from the floor? That would be Councillor Bain would be the seconder. Councillor Sabiri, did you want to start? Excuse me just for one moment. Director?
Doesn't the notice of motion have to be read formally? Okay.
Councillor Sabiri, would you like to introduce the item and speak to it?
Thank you. I didn't intend to read the notice of motion. I thought it's there. So, yeah, I'll just speak to it if that's okay. So I brought this notice of motion because the present focus of the city centre plan has prioritised roads and buildings over the natural environment. We need to be mindful that the clay pans are not exciting or beautiful, but they have a lot of diversity and value. The city centre design should have been developed to better understand the effect of nutrient management, land use change, and climate change on flows and nutrient loads entering the clay pans. Instead, it really took into consideration Southern Leak Road and connecting different roads together, creating another bottleneck. I want to first address the issue of impact on traffic flow. Building roads and infrastructure investments like this do not automatically solve city congestion and traffic woes. In theory of induced demand, building more roads and adding more lanes gives the appearance of speeding up traffic, but really it's providing more reason to drive, and it also adds more capacity, which is almost immediately filled up with more cars. I now want to turn to the impacts of the natural environment. I'm not convinced that the studies undertaken for this site have assessed future impacts such as potential migrating of the TEC, groundwater rise, reducing the depth of active root zone, existing freshwater vegetation communities, potentially altering or even predicted increase of flood risks. Did we consult the Centre for Water Sensitive Cities when developing this plan, or were we gung-ho to carry on with building a road that was part of the plan developed in the early 90s, and the fragile environment of the clay pans came only secondary, only after it was opposed by our residents? I'll read an abstract from the submission Joe Stone from the Canning River Regional Park volunteers made to the EPA. Portions of the area proposed to be cleared are rated as being in good and very good condition. It is my contention that given optimum conditions, a high level of biological diversity would be found in the area proposed for clearance. And again, from the same submission, it should also be noted that the undeveloped areas adjacent to the clearing proposal will also be developed in the coming years. This will further increase the pressure on any remaining native fauna with limited dispersal capacity. This project needs to be assessed in the context of cumulative impact of all proposals in the area. I would like to note that many of my fellow councillors vote against the disposal of land that is public space because they value trees as a vital part of our ecosystem. I say to you, my fellow councillors, that a vote in favour of connecting Welshpool Road to Albany Highway through these clay pans would be a vote to destroy a very unique and fragile ecosystem. While it may not look as attractive as a tree or woodland area, the fact is its ecological significance is just as strong. Further to elaborate on Ms. Mawson's deputation, let's remember that our interdependence is extraordinary. The clay pans act as a carbon sink, and we all know, and the most recent Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change report has told us how fast carbon dioxide emissions have been rising and where they're coming from. It also tells us how global temperatures and rainfall patterns have changed and how they're expected to change in this century. We are in a volatile period of history, and we need to take care of this blue-green earth we live on. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Bain.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I will be voting in support of this motion and the safeguarding of the Cannington clay pan and the threatened ecological community it contains. All three tiers of government recognise and endorse the importance, uniqueness and rarity of the threatened ecological community that exists at the Claypan, including our own local biodiversity strategy. The local biodiversity strategy, produced only 3 years ago, identifies the TEC in Cannington as being of high conservation value and sensitivity. It describes it as one of the most threatened vegetation complexes and recommends its protection. Given its findings and recommendations on the TEC, as well as its environmental objectives, it is clear that there is conflict and inconsistencies between the strategy, its vision, and the clearing of the TEC to build the Southern Link Road Stage 3. As mentioned previously, development has already reduced the size of the TEC by 97%. The Southern Link Road, its adjoining footpath and accompanying earthworks, movement of heavy machinery, gutters, drains, etc., will clear more of it and potentially compromise what is left. Regardless of what parts the TEC might be considered degraded, the Southern Link Road will be constructed in an environment declared a threatened ecological community by the Commonwealth Environmental Protection and Biodiversity Conservation Act 1999, the Western Australian Biodiversity Conservation Act 2016, and also the Minister for Environment in 2018. Construction of the road will clear a section of the TEC identified as being in very good condition and one of the most intact and thriving parts. A couple of years ago, I lived in the apartments only metres from where the road is proposed to be built. I can attest to this TEC being full of frogs during winter. I've observed bush birds, water birds and birds of prey in and around the Claypan. In 2019, the City employed Ecoscape to conduct a native bee survey at the Claypan. The survey concluded that the Cannington Claypan is considered to have high value as a native bee habitat with 47 different species recorded. It also concluded that the proposed Southern Link Road will go through habitat where many native bees were collected, and removal of this part of the Claypan will have adverse effects on the native bees with the loss of habitat, pollution and road mortality. We have recently received great news that will change traffic conditions in the area, with elevated rail being installed along the Armidale line. This will see the removal of the level crossings at Wharf and William Streets, which both connect Albany Highway and Welshpool Roads, and Cannington with Queen's Park and East Cannington. These roads are on or near the perimeter of the city centre, not within it, and with the level crossings removed will provide much improved vehicle access. The Canning City Centre movement, access and parking strategy is clear in its warnings of future traffic saturation in the city centre, and recommends the city implement measures to reduce the amount of traffic and increase the number of people accessing the city centre by walking, riding and public transport. The Southern Link Road will increase traffic in the city centre precinct, bringing in 20,300 vehicles per day by 2031, numbers not too distant from those recorded by main roads on Manning Road last year. The strategy also warns that the proposed Southern Link Road will make congestion issues on Albany Highway worse. It is put forward that foregoing main roads funding will likely cause reputational damage to the city. Conversely, we also need to consider the reputational damage that will be incurred with building a road through a TEC. Tonight, I, like Sean mentioned, hope we can give real meaning to those words, threatened ecological community, and save the Cannington Claypan. It would be a decision consistent with both state and federal acts and our own sustainability policy and local biodiversity strategy. We're privileged to have such an extraordinary and rare environment in Canning, and remarkably in our own city centre. As the last remaining community of its type, and for the vital habitat it provides, it is worthy of protection, and every effort should be made to preserve what remains. Saving the TEC for all the flora and fauna, investing in it for future generations of Canning, is a decision we could be proud of and look back on as a significant achievement for this council. Thank you to my fellow elected members for considering this motion. I hope that it receives your support. Thank you, Mr Mayor.
Thank you. Councillors, I'm going to move a procedural motion from the Chair that the matter be adjourned to the November 2021 meeting, and then I'll speak on that procedural motion. Governors, can I get you just to put that up?
Mayor, do you require a seconder?
November 2021. I'll just ask for a seconder for the procedural motion. Deputy Mayor, thank you. Councillors, I'll just speak to the adjournment, and just for the sake of those in the gallery, with a procedural motion, the putter of the motion, which is myself, gets to speak on the matter for a few moments. No other elected member is able to speak on the matter, and then we put the matter to the vote. If the matter is carried, then obviously we will come back in November. My take on this, councillors, is in no way does my procedural motion diminish or disagree with either the points raised by Councillor Saberi or Councillor Bain. In fact, I applaud their passion, and I thank them very much for raising this, and I can see the support in the gallery. My concern with this, for the sake of those that are here that know, Council was only made aware of this over the weekend. I only learned of it on Sunday, and I've been at the local government WALGA conference for the last 3 days. So this is an issue that has massive implications, not only for the environment if it's not handled correctly, but also from a reputation and economic point of view, a financial point of view for the City of Canning. This is a multi-million-dollar motion, and not only that, we're asking Council to basically rescind an earlier decision. So when we actually put our budget to Council some months ago, and we spent months talking about our budget, this was one of the items that was actually included in the budget that Council carried. And so for us to actually then flip on that decision, we're basically rescinding an earlier decision to fund this item. So I just don't feel that we would be doing justice to the matter by dealing with it tonight. I'm not right across it. I've got questions that I would really like to ask of the administration. I would like to think that over the next 8 weeks we would have an opportunity to ask those questions and perhaps request further information from the CEO and the administration. The reason I've asked for November is that with the local government elections occurring towards the end of October, there just won't be sufficient time if we have any new councillors on the City of Canning Council to brief them before they would be required to deal with this if we put it to the October meeting. So I'm thinking, I don't think it's that urgent that we really need to deal with it immediately or in October. And I'm asking Council on the basis that we simply have not had time to read through the information in just 3 days. I didn't have any forewarning of this until it appeared in the agenda. So I'm just respectfully asking that we exercise our own due diligence and sound decision making, which would be to put this item off to the November meeting so Council can be fully briefed and make an informed decision that would be in the best interest of the community and also the environment. And that is the reason why I think it should be adjourned. That's all I've got to say on the matter. We'll put the matter to the vote.
The procedural motion to defer debate on item NOM 010-21 has been carried 7 in favour, 4 against, with councillors Bain, Barry, Saberi and Sweeting voting against the motion.
Thank you. Thanks, councillors. I look forward to debating the matter when it comes back to the November meeting, and I appreciate, as I said, you both raising it. We'll move on to, thank you very much to the gallery. I hope you understand what just happened. I apologise if that has let you down in some regards, but council has resolved that would be the best course of action at this moment. So we'll see you hopefully in November. We will move on to item 12, reports of committee meetings. Item 12.1, report of Audit and Risk Committee meeting, which was held on the 13th of September 2021. The recommendation is on page 4 of the agenda and is on screen right now. Can I have a mover for that item, please? Thank you, Councillor Barry. Seconder? Councillor Holland, thank you. Councillor Barry, have you got anything you'd like to add?
Nothing further to add, thank you.
Councillor Holland?
Yes, Mr Mayor. I think I'm seconding the motion and I'm in favour of it, and I think everybody who moves the motion or seconds the motion should actually say whether they're in favour of the motion. not just put
Yeah,
in
if
the
you'd like
motion?
to.
Because
Yep, you're in favour of it?
we're just putting the motion, that's all that is. And then we should be saying...
I don't disagree. Yep.
Yeah, okay.
Okay. Thank you. So you've got nothing further to add? But you're in favour of it? Yep.
Yes, I speak in favour of it.
Okay, thank you very much. Councillors will put the matter to the vote.
Item 12.1, the Audit and Risk Committee reports, has been carried unanimously, 11 in favour.
Thank you. We moved item 13. At item 13.1, the responsible officer for this report is Mr Stephen Kane. It's from the Office of the CEO. The item is OC 005 of 21. The title of the report being Advocacy Priorities for 2021-2022. The recommendation is on page 6 of tonight's agenda and is also on screen. Can I have a mover from the floor, please? Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Seconder, please. Seconder from the floor. Councillor Kunza, thank you for that. Deputy Mayor.
Yes, I reviewed this and I'm happy to support it. It basically, in my understanding, lists some projects that we're going to continue to advocate for. I think they're all very worthy projects and support. I don't want to list them, but they're pretty much there, A to I. And it would be great. Some of them are, they're in different areas of the city. But for example, like undergrounding power and LED light conversion is something that we've talked about and makes very good economic sense, makes very good environmental sense and safety sense. So I've looked at this and I can't see anything on this list that shouldn't be there. So I'm going to support it. Let me keep my comments brief and I'll give an opportunity to other councillors to speak. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Kunza.
Mr Mayor, yeah, I speak in favour of the officer recommendation. It's something that's been a long time coming in the City of Canning. I've lamented during my time some of the election cycles in which the city hasn't really had much to say in this space, and so I commend the interim CEO and his staff for pushing this. Some of these are long, large projects that will evolve in time, but it's important that we have a document and a position in place so that we can work at election cycles and also between election cycles and push for funding from other tiers of government and grasp any opportunities. But there's still more work to be done in this space. As I said previously, there's smaller grant opportunities that we need to formalise and put out there so that the city and local community organisations can take every opportunity that avails itself.
Thank you, Councillor Kunza. Anyone wish to speak against this matter before we put it to the vote? Councillor Bain, you wish to speak against it?
Just a question, please, Mr Mayor, if I may. Yeah.
Yes.
In 2020, it was anticipated that the upgrade to the playground at Kent Street Weir would be delivered this financial year. Obviously, things have changed. In the advocacy paper, the playground is set to be delivered in 23-24. If funding is made available, would the city be in a position to bring those works forward in regard to the playground?
So you're in a position, or would you like Director Bowe? Would you like to
Thank you,
respond?
Mr Mayor.
Thank you, Director.
The bringing forward of the playground, irrespective of the funding, is unlikely to be achieved given it's a part of a work package that relies on other elements of that master plan or precinct plan being delivered, Councillor Bain. So that's the time frame.
Thank you. Anyone else? Councillor Barry?
Thank you, Chair. Just a question. So I'll assume that these are not in an order of priority, is that correct?
CEO?
That's correct, Mr Mayor.
And then just in relation to Shelley Bridge, has the city, I know we've done a bit of work on the Centenary Avenue ramp, but has the city commissioned anybody to do any work on the Shelley Bridge duplication?
CEO?
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I've actually got a draft update to go to all elected members next week that talks about all of the main roads, major projects across the city, including Shelley Bridge anticipated timeframes. It is a main roads project. It's not something that the city would be able to do any preemptive work on. We are in their timeframe, and currently on 2024, just after 2024, would be the early stage for any design delivery work on that project.
So would we be putting any money into it or not? Or is it strictly federal, state and main roads?
CEO?
Thank you, Mr Mayor. No, it's external funding from it's a federal and state government funded project only.
All right. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Holland?
I've got a couple of questions too. Just going on that, are you saying that the state government is going to look at this in 2024? Is that what I just understood?
No, not earlier than that. In fact, I think it says 2024 with a plus mark.
Plus,
so
because
after that at some stage, there's nothing defined.
Because I can remember it was you, Mr Mayor, asked Rita Sapiotti and she said 50 years.
Yeah, it was initially, I think, when I first started
50
looking at
years.
it with Councillor Kunze some years ago, I think it was 2035 on their forward planner at that stage, and it seems to be creeping forward. I think the reason for that is they're doing the big overpass, a number of large overpasses further along on Leach Highway there. They've done one at Orrong Road. The most recent one is going to be at Welshpool Road. That's happening right now. We've got all the work that's happened all the way through on Leach Highway to the airport to the east and all the way through to Fremantle in the west, and so I think that's why it's probably been moved forward.
I just don't understand why we put it on a priority list when the state government itself has said this is not on their agenda for 50 years. I think, what are we doing?
I don't think that's the case any
That's
longer.
what she
This is
said
only for
to you.
advocacy, so it's not a priority of ours. We're advocating for it, so we'll keep trying to convince the state government, and I've already met with Minister Sapiotti, and I'm meeting with Minister Johnson tomorrow, but just to talk about the opportunities that it presents for the city, the lack of connectivity. We're really in a rare position at the City of Canning, as you know, Councillor Holland. We're probably one of the only council in Western Australia that is completely divided down the centre by a river, and the only way we can get across from one side to the other are bridge crossings at Nicholson Road, Riverton and Shelley. So we're in an extraordinary position, and our major traffic bridge, which is the Shelley Bridge, has no connectivity for pedestrians, for cyclists, for young mums, for anybody. So we're trying as hard as we can just to advocate where we can to try and ask them to bring it forward. So that's why it's on the list. Thank you. Anyone else before we put this to the vote? Thank you. Oh, Councillor Sweeney.
Yes, look, I'm in favour of the motion. I just have a quick question. It's come up before with my community, and I was wondering, through you, Mr Mayor, to the CEO, whether or not the CEO could provide a cost breakdown of how much money council and grants has been spent on each ward in the last 5 years. Is that something that, I don't expect you to come up with a fix right now, Mr CEO, but perhaps that's something you could get back to me on?
I might just get you to respond to that, Mr CEO. Is that something we would normally do? Or able to do?
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Look, as far as I know, most local governments don't try and assign monies to particular wards. It's always considered where the greatest need is in the city. If you're only looking at city-based projects, excluding our state government initiatives, in the last state election, a whole raft of projects were promised across the district that had nothing to do with any allocation by the city. So we can go back and look at where we've spent money ourselves. It will take us some time to come back and do that, but the normal process is not to look at allocating monies by ward. It's for you to put monies where they have the greatest need.
Thank you.
Yeah, I understand that. I understand the reasons behind that, but I do get that question asked by the community, so if it is something that you could provide me with some clarity on, that would certainly help.
Are we able to provide the breakdown, CEO?
I think it would take us some time. We'd have to go back to the Capital Works program for the last 5 years and distribute it by ward. I suppose we can do that. It will just
Might just take a little while to get to, but we can certainly organise that. Thanks, Councillor Sweeney. Councillors, we might put the matter to the vote. Thank you.
Motion OC 005-21 has been carried unanimously, 11 in favour.
Councillors, we move on to item 13.2, the responsible officer being Director Warren Bowe, the Acting Director Canning Corporate and Commercial. The item is CC 041 of 21. The title of this report being Complaints Policy for Council Members, Committee Members and Candidates. Councillors, in front of you have the officer recommendation. One of those two items must be moved, either option A, which is that council adopts the complaints policy for council members, committee members and candidates as contained in attached 1, or option B, the Council adopts the complaints policy for Council members, committee members and candidates as contained in Attachment 2, and requests the Interim Chief Executive Officer to provide a report to the 19 October 2021 Ordinary Council meeting with draft terms of reference for the Complaints Committee as prescribed in the policy of Attachment 2, supported with any recommended delegation for Council's consideration. The recommendation is on page 15 of tonight's agenda and also appears on screen. Can I have a mover? Councillor Sweeney, I'm going to need you to move either option A or option B.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Yeah, I'd like to, at this stage, move option B.
Okay, that's right. I'll ask for a seconder. Councillor Barry is the seconder. Councillor Sweeney, I'll ask you to speak to option B, please.
I do have just a small amendment, a small request, amending the policy, if I could just provide that.
Yes, what would be the amendment?
I would just like to remove the vexatious proceedings clause. I'd like that removed from the policy. Would you like me to speak on behalf of this amendment now, or
we'll
at
have
some
to get
point?
a seconder for that. I'm just asking. I might just ask governance to. We'll give them a moment to catch up. We'll have to actually put that in as an amendment. So it'll be option B. We'll have a 1, a 2 and 3, and 3 will say something along the lines of subject to the
Policy being amended.
subject to the policy being amended to remove reference to vexatious proceedings. We'll just wait for a moment until governance have that typed up on screen, Councillor Sweeney, and then I'll ask you to read it and make sure that you're happy with the wording of it, and then I'll ask you to speak to it after we have a seconder, if we receive a seconder. Councillor Porter, for the record, has seconded the amendment. I think it's vexatious proceedings, governance. I think the reference is proceedings.
It's only defined in the definitions.
It appears under the scope, under the definitions.
Are you happy with what you read on screen? So just for the audio, the amendment is subject to the policy being amended that the clause referring to vexatious proceedings be removed. In fact, I think it's a definition, not a clause, is it?
If you want to do this as a minor amendment,
No.
you don't.
No, I don't. We'll need to discuss it. So it'll be the definition referring to vexatious proceedings, Stacey, not... Oh, we'll leave it as clause. Okay, we'll leave it as clause. Councillors, we are putting this through as an amendment. We have Councillor Porter has seconded the amendment. Councillor Sweeney, I'll ask you to speak to, just to the amendment, only to the amendment.
Yeah, could I just make one comment about what I'm seeing on the screen, Mr Mayor?
Yeah, go ahead.
I just want to make sure that we're talking about where it appears under point 1, which is the scope, but it also appears under section 4B, initial assessment by the authorised officer. So it's those two sections which mentions vexatious proceedings.
It says all references to vexatious proceedings be removed, so I think that would cover it. Yep. Councillor Sweeney.
Okay, yes, I will speak for it now. Look, this doesn't get away from the council needing a code of conduct. Of course we need a code of conduct. But firstly, I think that determining that a notification is vexatious is very difficult to prove. There are no clear definitions in the policy on what constitutes a vexatious complaint or courses of action to deal with someone considered vexatious. For me, it's a bit light on and quite ad hoc in description in its current form. Naming someone vexatious can come at great cost in legal terms and potentially cause unnecessary reputational damage to the city. Secondly, if the ratepayers are making genuine concerns about any type of risk, we need to hear about it as councillors. I don't think it's a good look when we all agree in principle to a code of conduct and the very first thing that we do is put a mechanism in place, such as vexatious proceedings, to circumvent public scrutiny and transparency. Thirdly, to include vexatious proceedings in the scope, I feel is out of step with the comments recently made by our own Minister for Local Government, who has publicly said that the person that sometimes does all the complaining and seen perhaps to be somewhat annoying may in fact be right in their statements. I think it gives too much power to one person, in this case the authorised officer, which is the CEO, to shut someone down by including a loophole in our policy to evade public scrutiny. Speaking from my own experience, someone who has been under the microscope of public scrutiny for many years, I feel if you're doing the right thing, councillors, you have nothing to worry about. Our ethics and integrity should be beyond reproach at all times. We should be seen to confront the issues and not run away from them. Finally, to my knowledge, we have never had to deal with any type of vexatious complaint previously. It's not something that has ever transparently come up before in council, certainly not in my time. So why are we worrying about something that hasn't occurred? This shouldn't be our focus, and we shouldn't be discouraging people from coming forward with their concerns. Councillors, if you decide to include vexatious proceedings in this policy without a comprehensive definition, then the community will see this as nothing more than a loophole to evade public scrutiny. It's not what I signed up for, and it's not the right thing to do. We should be protecting the integrity of the complaints process and not avoiding it. So I would ask all the councillors to support me on this. Thanks, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Councillor Porter.
Through you, Mr. Mayor. I share the same concerns as Councillor Sweeney, and that it could be abused just to stifle dissent of the complainants, and it definitely, it leaves us open to criticism if we bury complaints. Thank you.
Thank you. I'll just, if you don't mind, I might just speak against the amendment. I actually agree with what Councillor Sweeney is saying to a point. I think the difficulty with this model code of conduct we have that's been foisted upon this sector is that it's an absolute mess. And the Local Government Act specifically means that if a minor breach complaint is actually made against a councillor, unless a breach finding has actually been made, it's actually unlawful under the Act for any person, either party, the person who made the complaint, who was maybe a member of the public, or the councillor involved in the complaint, to actually even say that there has been a complaint. So when Councillor Sweeney correctly says, we don't have any vexatious complainants here, I mean, we haven't had to deal with this, I don't know anything about it, I can tell you categorically that we have vexatious complainants. There are a number of councillors here who have been dealing with innumerable complaints being made against them. I myself have been subjected to an orchestrated campaign over a number of years now that I think we need to have a provision here for ruling in favour of ruling out people who are continually making mischievous, unsubstantiated complaints for all the wrong reasons. So, Councillor Sweeney, I 100% agree with you about transparency and dealing with complaints as they come up, but I think the reality is there are people in the community who don't always operate in good faith, and sometimes they are making complaints for all sorts of reasons, including personal agendas, and it's really difficult to deal with those if we don't have the mechanism to prevent them from continuing to actually lob those complaints into this council. And of course there's an awful lot of time involved from the complaints officer and staff to deal with those complaints, and of course for the elected members who are subjected to those complaints. So that's my view on it. I think I agree with Councillor Sweeney. I think the wording of it is a little bit light. I think it's it could probably be worded a little bit better. I think it could be a little bit tighter. Perhaps we could deal with that at some later point, but I just think we need a trigger in the policy somewhere to deal with people who are not necessarily making complaints for all the right reasons. And look, I'm all for public scrutiny. Someone wants to make a complaint, I will certainly answer it, but there has to come a point where we need to draw a line in the sand to make this a safe workplace for people that actually operate in it, and to defend ourselves against people who are vexatious by nature. That's it. Anyone else like to speak either for or against? And we're only talking about the amendment at the moment. Thanks, Councillor Ponaturo. We're just talking about the amendment, which is to remove the term vexatious.
I would like to support Councillor Sweeney's amendment because we are elected by the people of Canning, and we are expected to behave ethically and the best behavior and professionally. And if we were to be scrutinized by the community, and why are we behaving like that? And we shouldn't be behaving, and we shouldn't be even worried about that. So if we are honest and we behave ethically and in the best interest of people of Canning, and we make evidence-based decision and professionally, and I support Councillor Sweeney's. I think all of you should do so. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Ponaturai. Councillors, anyone else? Councillor Kunza.
I'll speak against the amendment. I'm not quite sure why the view is that it's not defined properly. I mean, there's an Act of Parliament that basically outlines this, and as the definitions of the policy state, if you can go to the actual Act of Parliament, and vexatious proceedings means proceedings which are an abusive process of a court or a tribunal, instituted to harass or annoy, to cause delay or detriment for any other wrongful purpose, instituted or pursued without reasonable ground, or conducted in a manner so as to harass or annoy, cause delay or detriment, or achieve any other wrongful purpose. Local governments are held to a standard. Questions can be asked of decisions. There's an ombudsman that reviews decisions of local governments. Should there be a request for that? Why you'd remove an instrument that's defined within an Act of Parliament to prohibit people from using the complaint system in a vexatious manner is beyond me. As the Mayor has said, you don't know how many vexatious complainants are out there because it's all done under confidentiality. I don't know why we'd remove that from the draft complaints policy, and I encourage councillors not to remove it from the draft complaints policy.
Thank you. Councillor Holland, did you have your hand up? Sorry. Sorry to preempt you. Anyone else wish to speak either for or against it before we put the matter to the vote? Councillor Barry.
Yes, thank you. Just a couple of questions. And I agree with you in relation to what the state government has done, and I suppose it's colloquially a dog's breakfast. But as I read the Vexatious Proceedings Act, it talked about magistrates and tribunals, not minor breaches. I 100% agree with Councillor Sweeney because along with you and the CEO and I think Councillor Ponaturai and Deputy Mayor Jacobs, we were at that breakfast where Minister Carey was asked a similar question, and he was very, very cautious, saying, be careful what you say, because even though somebody thinks this particular person is vexatious, in actual fact, a lot of people that have been tagged with that name have actually gone ahead and won cases that they have brought against different authorities. Now, by the same token, I've seen over the last week there's been a number of questions and communications back from a couple of councillors with the officers, which only goes to prove that this is the epitome of the dog's breakfast. But I mean, I think for us to give an arbitrary, or give a person the arbitrary decision as to who is vexatious, I think is completely wrong, because by the same token, I think if it goes to court, the person who was declared vexatious, if he had a lawyer, and we don't want to get into that, has the right to appeal that, and he may or may not get a ruling in his favour. For us to be just giving somebody, an authorised person, the arbitrary power to go, you're vexatious, that's it, and we know nothing about it. So I support the amendment 100%. Thank you.
Councillors, unless there's somebody else wants to speak, we might just put it to the vote. Councillor Holland.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Yes, I actually support the amendment. I've got a real problem with delegating the authority to just a single person. It doesn't matter who it is, could be me. And I've got the right to accuse Councillor Sweeney of being vexatious because I've got that authority. It could have come down to giving you my own experience that before I came on council I was here banging on the door and all this sort of thing and bringing up a few points and going further. It could have easily been labelled by the then CEO, which I can't even remember who it was, or whoever Dakin could have labelled me as it. And I got support from the local politician and all this for my cause, but I was in here fighting for something that I believed in. And I kept coming, and I kept coming, and I kept coming. Does that make me vexatious? And if I kept coming because I disagreed with you, just using you as an example, Mr. CEO, not personally, but as an example of your station, that I did something that you completely disagreed with, and I came back, kept on arguing, am I vexatious? Because I disagree. I did nothing wrong when I was coming in here all the time, except fight for what I believed in. I think it's the definition of vexatious is actually not as clear as it might have been quoted from Councillor Kunze, and that only references the state government. Now, the state government has also put in this code of conduct, which we've just had referred to as a dog's breakfast, and I'm not sure what your terminology was, Mr. Mayor, but it wasn't flattering on that. So it doesn't mean that whatever the state government has got in there as definitions or whatever is actually really good or really correct. This is a classic example of it. I don't think Walga doesn't like this. I don't think any council likes this, so it can go like that. So I won't go on, Mr. Mayor. I'll just say that I will support Councillor Sweeney's amendment. Thank you for your time.
Thanks, councillors. The mood seems to be fairly clear on the amendment. I'm happy to put it to the vote if you'd like, unless there's somebody who feels compelled to speak. Councillors, has put the matter to... Councillor Sweeney, I'll ask you to rebut if you'd like, just to close. I spoke against it, as did one other councillor.
Yeah, look, no, I'm quite happy with what I originally said. I don't think what has been said needs to be rebutted by me at this stage. Okay. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Sweeney. That being the case, we'll put the matter to the vote. This is only for the amendment, councillors.
Amendment to item CC 041-21 has been carried. 8 in favour, 3 against. Those voting against, the Mayor, Councillors Kunze and Spencer Teo.
Thank you, councillors. The matter has been resolved by council. It now becomes our substandard part of our substandard motion. You now have the substandard motion. I'll just allow governors to catch up, which will be 1, 2 and 3. Councillor Sweeney, you actually moved this matter. Councillor Barry, you were the seconder for it originally. Councillor Sweeney, I'll now invite you to speak to the original recommendation, please. Oh, as amended, you.
Yeah, I'm happy for it to go forward at this stage. I've got nothing further to say, Mr. Mayor.
Okay. Councillor Barry, have you got anything further you'd like to add in relation to the matter?
Not really, but I will mention that...
Not really, but you will?
Yes. You know me.
Last question.
Yes. Just in relation to B, it does say with the draft terms of reference for the Complaints Committee as described, I'm supporting Councillor Sweeney on this because I think even when it does come back to the October one, there is scope for us to re-look at this because it will be a draft in that form. And I mean, I suppose when I look at it, once again, I'll go back to those questions that the councillors were fielding to the administration this week. And I mean, even in the confidentiality of complaints, it says words like the city will take all reasonable steps to maintain confidentiality. Now, given the exercise that we've had over the last couple of weeks, I think the wording seems a little bit short on, particularly when it says, the fact that complaints deal. Well, it basically says the officers will do the best they can, and they warn plaintiffs, or the respondents, etc., that they must keep it secret or confidential as such. The other question I sort of would ask is, even when a committee is formed, does that committee have the access to all past complaints at Canning, successful or not, to avail themselves of, once again, a possible vexatious or trivial complaint made by either councillors or members of the public?
Director, CEO.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. No, the issue for the complaint is you deal simply with the matter at hand. It's not about trying to bring into the consideration other matters that don't relate to that complaint. Just like a standards panel doesn't look at all of the other matters that may have been considered, it looks at just the substance and facts for that complaint.
I suppose the point that I was looking at from the perspective of if somebody goes to court, yes, you deal with it on merit as it stands before you, but if you're found guilty, then I think they can look back at your past history to say, well, this guy's got
That only goes for a consideration of penalty. Yeah.
No?
You only look at the record for the consideration of penalty after a finding is made.
That's basically what I'm saying. Does and will the committee have that power to see past indiscretions as such they may be?
CEO, I think the CEO is saying that no.
In this case, they wouldn't for the nature of the consideration of the offence, but in terms of the making of the action plan might include reference if the same matter was come back 3 times, Mr Mayor, then you might want to make a different action than doing the same thing over and over again. So yes, that would be considered, but only in terms of the action plan, not in terms of the substance of the complaint.
So maybe that could be considered as part of the draft. All right, thank you.
Deputy Mayor.
I support.
Thanks, Mr Mayor. Just keep my comments brief. I support option B. Look forward to looking at a report. However, I do want to predicate my comments by saying I think we've got a long, long way to go with this, and I think it's needs some work. There's a few risks. One is I think maybe it might be another tier of government aiming to cost shift. I think it may be the Victorian model where they have an independent body might be the best, and I think it risks. We need to spend a lot of time on this because otherwise, if we don't get it right, it may politicise the whole complaints process. So I'm happy to support option B. Mr Mayor, I'll have a look at the report, but I think there's a lot of things we need to work through in the future with this. Thank you.
Councillor Spencer Teo.
Just hearing everybody tonight kind of confirms where I'm going with this. I don't support it at all. I didn't sign up for this. I didn't sign up to be judge and jury of my peers, and I certainly didn't sign up to be judged by my peers. We've got the minor breaches, which is handled by the standards panel, and we've got criminal and corrupt behaviour, which is handled by CCC and the department. What's this? Petty complaints? It hasn't been tried and tested. It is very ad hoc. It was thrown in, well, in my opinion, it was thrown in at the last minute by a minister who had 1 foot out the door, and the current minister is saying he's going to provide reform and early intervention and most likely maybe even scrap this. Another concern I have is what happens when we're having dinner and we're all bantering about the footy and someone's feeling a little bit sensitive, and they feel insulted that, someone bagged their team. Oh, is this going to result in us spending our time under confidential cover? Because that's what it is. It's absolutely petty. I think we're all old enough and professional enough to be able to handle ourselves in a certain way. And yeah, when I ask questions at the SIB, it's basically, oh, we don't know, we just have to kind of go through the process and wait and see what happens. Well, that's not good enough for me. I want to know what's going to happen, how it's going to happen before I decide on it. So if anything, I would revisit this at another stage, but just to put it in now and say, let's just work on it as we go, it's not good enough for me. Sorry. Thanks.
Councillors, anyone else wish to speak on the matter? Councillor Kunza.
Yes, Mr Mayor, I speak against the officer recommendation. These systems are similar to using a nuke to kill an ant. There's the amount of collateral damage that this involves across a sector is remarkable. These systems don't make things better, it just creates more division. I mean, look at what's been happening recently. Councillor Barry? I just want to look at what's happening in the city of Wanneroo lately, over the past week. I'm unsure how that is supposed to improve behaviour on their council. They say there's confidentiality involved, but then the media reports on the alleged transgression, including how much of the detail of the complaint. That elected member's reputation is now damaged. A report was provided to council, voted on 9/6. How is that council expected to function effectively from now on? I understand a revocation motion's now been lodged by some councillors, meaning the whole thing will be up for debate again. How does that lead to good government? What happens when one elected member makes a standards panel complaint against another? Do they ever really reconcile? Now, in the September 4 edition of the Western Suburbs Post, it was reported that Minister Carey is already looking to dump this complaint system. Well, that didn't really last long. But why would we act further to adopt a system that the Minister is already looking to dump? The article that I referred to here painted a pretty poor image on how things can go wrong with the complaint system and centred around the city of Subiaco and the authorised inquiry. In fact, so many complaints were lodged that they actually sought external assistance. I assume from someone that we will look in as an external investigator. And we've used this firm before. Now, it's reported that the inquiry found that the outside firm gave incorrect advice with respect to some of the complaints, yet we're expected to rely on the outside firms as part of this complaints process. Now, at the last few local government elections, some candidates and elected members had to go through some terrible situation. In fact, mud has been thrown in this election by members of the public, yet nothing's ever done to help candidates and elected members. We're just supposed to sit here and take it while members of the public try to tear us down. Now, I see why a number of elected members across the sector, including Subiaco actually, have decided not to recontest their seat. Now, I read recently that council members are the most heavily regulated members of the community. Currently, members can lodge complaints left, right and centre, no one ever knows unless the elected member is found guilty. Members of the public can submit various allegations. If it's found to be no breach, it's put under lock and key despite costing the local government thousands of dollars. When a complaint is thrown out and being vexatious, again, confidential. Apparently, we're supposed to sit here and take it. Now, sadly, we're just sitting here and nothing's ever really said. But the system's so broke that even the department doesn't know what we can and can't do. I recently rang the elected member hotline to request advice regarding whether it was okay for me to write a letter of support for a local organisation. In brief, the answer I received was they couldn't tell me, and I was subsequently advised that I'd have to wait to see whether a standards panel complaint was made against me and see what the panel decided. Really? Is that how we're supposed to proceed? Is that how you build a system? Now, I believe we need a system that applies to both state government MPs and local government MPs, elected members. What's good for the goose is good for the gander. Now, I'm unsure why there's a complaint system in place for local government elected members, but not for state or federal MPs. And so I will foreshadow an alternative, and that is that council resolves not to adopt the complaints policy for council members, committee members and candidates, and B, request the Mayor to write to the Minister for Local Government highlighting council's concerns with the current complaint system and request that the state government create a complaints model that includes both state government and local government elected members.
Councillor, can I just ask you to give that to governance, and I'll ask governance to type that up and put that on the screen for the benefit of the council so we can have a look at that. We'll just pause for a moment, councillors, while governance catch up. Yes, you can ask a question in the interim. Councillor Sabiri.
Thank you. I'd just like to know what the consequence would be if we didn't.
Director Bowe, the consequences if the matter is not resolved tonight? Notwithstanding that we have a foreshadowed motion.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Simply, the council would not have a policy to guide the authorised officer if, in the event that a complaint, other than the complaints management policy that exists.
So we'd use the existing CM, is it CM 102?
That's correct, Mr Mayor.
Okay, so we would revert to CM 102, so we have a process in place, but it's not the complaints policy. CEO?
Thank you, Mr Mayor. And look, just the observation that CM 102 is not fit for purpose for dealing for complaints against elected members, but it's the only guidance that I would have at that point in time. It doesn't allow anything to be dealt with through mediation. It doesn't allow for anything to be dealt with confidentially. It would just be a report straight back to council. And if there's a complaint received tomorrow, that's the only guidance I've got.
Councillor Kunze, you've still got your microphone on. I'll just get you to flick that off just for the time. Have you got a question, Deputy Mayor? Just a question? Yep.
we were obligated by the state government to endorse their code of conduct. Are we obligated, if we do this, have we still met the requirements of what they asked us to do? I mean,
we're complying with the legislation at the moment. That needed to be enacted by, I think, February the 5th or whatever that date was, by memory, or something like that. CEO?
Thank you, Mr Mayor. And it's just not endorse, it's adopt. So Council's formally adopted the model code of conduct. So it's the set of rules that apply now to govern you. This deals with how we handle any complaint under that model code.
So the foreshadowed motion is on screen. Councillor Kunza, can I get you just to read through it to make sure you're happy with the Deputy Mayor? Just 1 second. I'll just ask Councillor Kunza to read through his foreshadowed motion.
It looks right, Mr Mayor.
Okay, thank you, councillors. That's the foreshadowed motion. Deputy Mayor, you had another question?
just following on for that question. So if we write back to the minister and say, look, we don't like this, and we think that state government and federal government ministers or elected officials should be under the same thing, are we met our requirements, or are they saying, well, Canning's just push this back in our faces? Just want to know from a compliance perspective, are they going to say Canning's not compliant?
CEO.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Canning would still be compliant because we've adopted the model code of conduct. It's whether anyone takes any notice of what you send back to the minister. That's a subjective position, but you'd still have, if a complaint came through tomorrow, we would still have to handle that complaint. And so the only way I'd be able to manage that complaint will be in accordance with CM 102.
Councillor Barry.
Just a question, Mr Mayor. If we pass this tonight, as is, then if and when the minister sees fit to change it, he would have the power to rescind ours and all local governments' policies and install what he thinks. Is that correct? He would have that authority?
CEO.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. No, the Minister himself doesn't have any authority. He would have to amend the statute to govern the rules governing this. So I appreciate what Councillor Coulton has said, but as I've learned from the media, what gets reported in the Post ain't always necessarily the truth. If the minister were to move publicly that he's changed his mind and promoting something else, he would have to amend his own legislation, and that takes time to go back through a process.
Yeah, but
Councillor Barry.
The thing is, we've read chapter and verse how we needed this for the upcoming election, etc., etc. Now we're hearing a motion that if we don't pass it, I mean, it's just as easy if we do. I mean, is it just as easy that we do pass it? And because we all know how the wheels of government move, but given the current government and the majority that they do have, if it was decided by the minister, whatever the procedures would be in place, it would, I would suggest, possibly be a very quick one. Would you agree?
CEO, are you able to agree with that?
If the minister came back and made change, it would automatically, if he did through legislative, it would apply to the whole sector. Just picking up the point, adopting the policy tonight doesn't mean that it's set in stone. If the minister changed some rules tomorrow, it would automatically flow across to the whole sector.
I suppose the question I'm asking is that what we've been set before us, we're here to make a decision on. I hear this quite often, that, you know, we're here to make a decision, not to not make a decision. This is probably an opportunity that we make the decision and wait for the minister. If it's his baby...
are you speaking against it? Or
I'm speaking. I've already spoken, so...
Okay, thank you.
Just take what I've said.
Thank you.
Councillors,
look, I'm going to speak against it. I want to thank Councillor Sweeney and also Councillor Barry for introducing the matter, so at least we can debate it. And I know this will be a controversial matter for us to deal with tonight, but I agree to a point. This is an absolute mess. I don't agree that having matters, as petty as they may seem, to have a complaint dealt with by your own peers here in the room, how in the name of God are we going to actually be able to work together? Is that going to actually engender collegiate relations between us here at the room? Is it going to cause divisions or further divisions? How will we deal with this? The CEO was saying to me that if we had a matter that obviously involved a number of councillors, well, those councillors would need to declare an impartiality and they may need to step out of the room. But what then happens if the committee is actually drawn from this council? What if that matter actually occurs in this room and all of us are witnesses to it? What if it happened in the dining room while we're all in there? You may remember there may have been a matter that happened in the dining room that may have been witnessed by a whole bunch of people. If, for instance, something like that ever happened, how would we deal with this as a committee if all of us actually were witnesses? This is not our fault. This legislation that's been put to this council, it's put to this sector, is full of holes. It was rushed through. I don't think it's been well considered. Walga had a very different opinion and their advice, it appears, wasn't listened to. And councils like us, people like us, elected members like us, are here to pick up the pieces. I agree with Councillor Kunza that there is not a group of people in Western Australia that are held to a higher standard of conduct than elected members in local government. State parliament members are not held to the same account. Federal members are not held to the same level standard. But we are for some inexplicable reason. And not only that, to make it worse, these matters are not dealt with by some external group of people or an ombudsman or anybody that's independent of the personalities and relationships in this room. We have to fight it out amongst ourselves. I think it's just a disgraceful thing to actually force onto a council. And do you know what? I just don't know how in good conscience I could sit here, because we all have differing opinions. It's easy to say that we will be able to work our way through this, but I can say dealing with complaints is a really specific profession. Complaints management is not something that can be just pushed onto a group of people. This policy at the moment doesn't provide any complaints management training, doesn't talk about rules of evidence, doesn't talk about procedural fairness. It doesn't educate the councillors that are needing to make these decisions about their colleagues. I just think it's extraordinary that we would be judge and jury. So this will be controversial tonight if we choose not to adopt the policy tonight. It doesn't mean we can't adopt the policy later. It doesn't mean the policy can't come back with amendments to this council at some later state. It doesn't mean that the CEO or subsequent CEOs can't reintroduce it. It does mean that we would have a fallback, as clumsy as it might be, that the CEO will have to awkwardly work his way around CM 102. But the CM 102 was then also open for interpretation and amendment by this council. If we decided not to adopt this policy but to stay with CM 102, it's within the remit of this council to bring it back to the next meeting, to a special council meeting if we so choose, to amend it to make it more fit for purpose than it currently is. I know this is not what the CEO wants to hear. I know this is going to place our administration in an awkward position, but I think it's time that councils in this sector lead. And that we actually stand up for our sector and and challenge the government to come to the party and to talk to us seriously about reform in this complaints process. I want it to work, but I want it to be fair. And I don't want to be sitting here being judge and jury on a complaint made against Councillor Sweeney or Councillor Sabiri, or I just don't want to be placed in a position of doing that. If you're okay with that, well, that's what you're voting for tonight, because you will be then judge and jury and you won't be able to select which one you are. You may be chosen to sit on a committee where you are going to be forced to make a judgment call on someone that you actually really respect and admire on this council. I think that would be all of us. I just think it's a dreadful position we've been placed in. So regrettably, but strongly, I will be voting against the policy, and if we get to a position where this policy is not adopted, I will be then supporting the foreshadowed motion by Councillor Kunza. Anybody else would like to speak either for or against it? Councillor Lindsay Holland.
Yes, Mr Mayor, I'm looking to speak for or against, and I'd like to move a procedural motion that this be adjourned to the November ACM.
Councillor Holland has raised a procedural motion under section 10 of the standing orders. Need a seconder, and that will be our Deputy Mayor. Deputy Mayor Jessie Jacobs has seconded the motion. Yes, Councillor Holland, would you like to speak to the procedural motion?
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I've heard a lot. Again, I think this is a dog's breakfast as well. But what concerns me is we can't, at this present time, I don't think we can actually vote against it per se, completely. We need to, I wanted this to go to November, not the October one, because we need to have further discussions here. One of the ones revolving around what was sent out to elected members today about appeals process. We need to discuss that a bit further rather than just chucking this out carte blanche. We cannot amend this if we vote against this. It cannot be brought back next month. It cannot be brought back to a special council meeting. It cannot be brought back at all for 3 months until you do under our legislation. It worries me a lot. I agree with a lot what you said, Mr Mayor. This whole thing worries me. Mr Mayor, I did ask you to write to the Minister at one stage with voicing our concerns. I think we need to come back to, rightly or wrongly, the ex-Minister has put this in our lap. And I think we all agree that it's wrongly at the moment, and I think most other councils do as well. But the fact is, it is in our lap at the moment. It's not, we cannot just say no to it at the moment without going through a little bit more information or trying to obtain more information, which we didn't get just in the last couple of days because it wasn't forthcoming, not from our people, but from the government itself. It worries me a lot that we would go down that path at this time. If we can have, I think we should have a SIB, or even not, if not another 2 SIBs. We've got a lot more questions to ask. Well, I certainly have. The other thing that I agree with, having it by committee, it's not that you would be put on a committee. Mr Mayor, I would have disagreed. You volunteer for a committee. You're not put on the committee. You're not saying, right, you're on the committee, you've got to make the decision. No, it doesn't work like that. I want to volunteer for the committee, I will. I don't agree with it at all, and I totally agree with Councillor Spencer-Teo saying that we're to be, which I had brought up before, to be judged by our peers is just wrong. I think, Mr Mayor, you mentioned that, I think Councillor Kunz as well, is just wrong. And how are you going to effectively operate in that situation? I think rather than knocking this out at the moment, I think we do need to discuss this further. There's a lot more questions. We can get a lot more information from the government. Walga is still, we need to have forthcoming things from Walga. Their plan is not exactly right. I think it's worthwhile having a forceful letter written to Minister Carey now and asking his opinion. And if it is going to be thrown out, then we've done our, if he throws it out that is, we've done our absolute due diligence by questioning this, not just by chucking it out, but by questioning it, say, look, we don't think this is right, we'll have another discussion, we don't think it should be done like this, can we suggest something else? And liaise with the Minister, because I think every local government at the moment is thinking this is wrong. Well, actually, I can't speak for every local government, but I have spoken to a few. They don't like it. For what Walga has told me, that is a majority of local government. But I think we need to have more discussion on this before we actually throw it out. So I'd rather put it off to November. Obviously October I don't think is right because we've got a new council. This is a huge decision. It's one of the biggest decisions we'll make in this council on how complaints are going to be dealt with here. So I'll leave it at that. I won't keep rambling. Thank you, Mr Mayor, and I'll just see how we go. But I think we need to discuss this more, and it's not going to hurt to put it off. It's not going to hurt. It's not the be-all and end-all if we do put it off for 2 months to get more further information, be enlightened more. Councillor Spencer-Teo brought, correct me if I'm wrong, saying that you had further things that you were concerns about. That's how we do it. We've got concerns. You've got concerns. I've got concerns. Let's go back and do another SIB where we can actually just put everything on the table, say what we can think, give a direction or ask for a direction to Mr Mayor to contact the relevant minister with our concerns, wait till he comes back. If he comes back and says, stuff you, this is exactly what you've got to do anyway, then if we want to, we can vote against it. But at least we've got a full book. I'll leave it at that. Thank you, Mr Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Holland. So Councillor Holland has put a procedural motion to adjourn the matter to the November council meeting, where we will pick up where we leave today if the matter is resolved by council. The procedural motion was seconded by Councillor Deputy Mayor Jesse Jacobs. We'll put the matter to the vote.
Procedural motion to adjourn item CC 041-21 has been carried. 10 in favour, 1 against, with Councillor Sabiri voting against.
I want to thank our guests from East Pilbara. Thank you very much for staying in the room this evening. No, it's been an absolute pleasure. I hope you enjoyed dinner. Thank you, and safe journey home. I second that. Councillors, we move to, as our guests from East Pilbara leave the room, we move to CC 042 of 21, budget review as at the 31st of July 2021. The officer's recommendation is on page 46 of tonight's agenda and is on the screen. Can I have a mover, please, from the floor? That'll be Councillor Holland. A seconder, please. Councillor Ponaturai. Thank you for that, Councillor Ponaturai. Councillor Holland.
Wrong button. Haven't been here for very long. Yes, Mr Mayor, I'm in favour of this motion, and I'll leave it at that. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Ponaturai, anything to add?
No, I just wanted to know the exact dates, the quarterly reports coming on the dashboard reports, please. Through you to Director Paul.
Didn't we ask that at the AB last week?
Yeah, but just said October, but what date do
Director
we know?
Bowe?
I'm unable to provide an exact date for Councillor Ponaturai, Mr Mayor. I had sent an email in relation to preparing that at the conclusion of the first quarter. So sometime after the conclusion of the first quarter of the financial year, we will draft a template for distribution and get some feedback from the elected members as to whether or not it meets
Definitely
their
coming.
needs.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councillor. Anyone else want to add anything before we put the matter to the vote? Councillor Barry.
Just a question, because the agenda briefing. Now, the answer that I've got here is that there was not around $40 million carry forward. The one question I would ask, just in relation to the capital works, what percentage of capital works did we actually complete as a percentage of 100%?
Director Bowe.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Of the approximate $55 million worth of capital works, we completed 52%.
Just 52. I mean, the other question I ask that because this is it's become a political topic because I've been reading candidates' stuff, and I mean they're all saying that we're in financial mismanagement. Just from the perspective, just looking through something earlier in relation to research to this, back in 2005-06, I mean, the budgets then, they had to do 97.5%, had to be complete. And I mean, it just worries me when we've only done 52%, with this, that and the other, yet I presume we've expended all of the salaries and wages. Is that correct for last year?
Director?
Those that were budgeted, yes, Mr Mayor.
Yeah.
Would have been
Okay,
expended.
Thank you. Councillors, anyone else before we put the matter to the vote? Thank you. We'll put the matter to the vote.
Motion CC 042-21 has been carried by absolute majority. 9 in favour, 1 voting against. Councillor Barrow voting against, noting that Councillor Sweeney was not in the room for the vote.
Thank you. The matter has been carried. We move to CC 043 of 21, monthly financial report for August 2021. The officer's recommendation is on screen. It also appears on page 66 of tonight's agenda. Can I have a mover, please, from the floor? Councillor Spencer-Teo, thank you. And a seconder? Councillor Holland, thank you. Councillor Spencer-Teo.
Nothing to add, thank you.
Councillor Holland, have you got anything you'd like to add? Yeah, you're in favour, obviously, of passing.
Sorry, yes,
Yeah,
nothing to
thank
add,
you.
yeah.
Thank you, Councillor Holland.
Yes, I'm in favour of this. Thank you, Mr Mayor. Nothing further to add.
Anyone else like to speak on the matter before we put it to the vote? Thank you, councillors. Put the matter to the vote.
Motion CC-043-21 has been carried 10 in favour, noting that Councillor Porter's absent for the vote.
Thank you. Councillor Barry, you just got your mic on too, by the way. We'll move on to item 13.3. Director Graham Bride is the responsible officer for this report. It's report number CD 028 of 21. The title of the report being Proposed Amendment of Local Planning Policy LP06, Design Review Panel and Assessment of Significant Development, post-public consultation and adoption. The recommendation for this item is on page 103 of tonight's agenda, and yes, there it is. It appears on screen right now. Can I have a mover for that item, please? Councillor Barry, thank you, and a seconder. Councillor Bain, thank you, Councillor Bain. Councillor Barry?
Yes, I speak in favour of it. Just a question, and I'm not sure whether it was answered at a previous meeting, but I'll ask it again just for the avoidance of doubt. What does the, I know we asked the City of Gosnells, but what do they have in relation to our design review panel? Do we share that or not? Thank you.
Director?
Through you, Mr. Yeah, we do share our design review panel with the City of Gosnells. They meet all their costs and the City of Canning meets all our costs.
Thank you. Anything further before we put the matter to the vote? Thank you, councillors. Oh, Councillor Bain, sorry, forgive me. Anything you'd like to add?
I support the officer's recommendation, Mr Mayor, and hope that we can achieve full cost recovery in 5 years. Thank you.
Fabulous. Thank you, councillors. Let's put the matter to the vote.
Losing councillors flat out.
Councillor Barry, please place your vote. Motion CD 02821 has been carried 10 in favour, noting Councillor Porter is absent for the vote.
Thank you. We're losing them quickly around the table at the moment, but we will move on. CD 029 of 21, the report title being City of Canning Animals, Nuisance and Environment, Local Law of 2021. The officer's recommendation is on screen. Absolute majority is required for this item. I note Councillor Barry has made an earlier declaration of impartiality for this item, and that was read to the meeting earlier in the meeting. Wish you well and your 4 chickens, Councillor. The recommendation is on page... I think it read, wasn't it?
He'd need to read the item just at this point in time. I made note that he would be making...
I'll read the... are you in a position to read it yourself, Councillor Barry?
No, it's not in front of me, so please go ahead.
I'll do that. So Councillor Barry's made an impartiality, declaration of impartiality in relation to this item, which is CD 029 of 21. The agenda is on page 132. The item details are, as I mentioned a moment ago, City of Canning, Animals, Nuisance and Environment Local Law. The nature of the association is that he has at his home 4 hens, 4 chickens, and obviously this matter deals with animals. Thank you, Councillor Barry. You're remaining in the room, Councillor Barry? Thank you very much. No, that's right. Councillors, I just need a mover for that matter, please. Councillor Sabiri, thank you very much, Councillor Sabiri. Councillor seconder, Councillor Barry. Councillor Sabiri.
I speak in favour of this motion and commend the officer's efforts in preparing this. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Sabiri. Councillor Barry, have you anything further to add?
No, I speak in favour, did I?
Anyone speaking against the matter? Councillors might put this matter to the vote.
Item CD-02921 has been carried by absolute majority with 11 in favour.
Thank you. We move to CD 030 of 21, City of Canning Local Government Property and Public Places Local Law of 2021. Again, absolute majority is required. Councillors, the recommendation is on page 159 of tonight's agenda and is on screen. A mover, please, for that item. Councillor Bain, thank you. A seconder? Councillor Holland. Councillor Bain.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I support the officer's recommendation. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Holland.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I support the officer's recommendation. No further comment.
Thank you. Anyone wish to speak against the matter? Thanks, councillors. In the absence of anybody wishing to speak against it, let's put the matter to the vote.
Item CD 030-21 is being carried by absolute majority, 11 in favour.
Thank you. The next item is item 13.4. Mrs Anita Primo, to my left, to your right, is the Acting Director for Canning Environment and the responsible officer for this item. It's EN 017 of 21, the title of the report being Parks Research and Discover Digital Solution. The recommendation is on page 168 and is also on screen. Can I have a mover, please? Councillor Ponaturai, thank you. A seconder? Seconder from the floor, please, councillors. Councillor Holland, thank you. Councillor Ponaturai.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. This notice of motion was brought in last year and just pardon my voice today. And there was it was identified there was an allocation of $30,000 to be allocated to do the reporting for this year. But with the report coming, talking about that currently we are unable to do this as an app, what I originally wanted, because I would note that we still do not have a proper asset register. So as we are all aware that lack of a asset register was identified as...
Excuse me, Councillor, I just have to, we've got a point of order here, I think, being called. Councillor
Sorry,
Holland.
Mr Mayor, for doing that.
Sorry, Councillor Ponaturai.
Is my colleague speaking for or against the motion?
Oh, sorry.
Thank you. Councillor Ponaturai speaking for the motion?
No, I'm speaking against for this.
Speaking against it, okay,
Yes.
thank you.
Yeah, that's what I said, okay. I give all my respect to the staff and the officers who have prepared the report, and the intention was to bring an app and to make that digitally better and more friendly. But given the report has come back and saying that we are unable to go ahead because of the current asset register is not up to date. So I would note that we still do not have a proper asset register, and as we are all aware, the lack of an asset register was identified as part of the major risk to our long-term financial plan. So given the apparent cost blowout and the failure to have a complete up-to-date asset register, I do not consider it is appropriate to continue with this motion and therefore withdraw or I don't support that. This can be considered when the council is in a better budgetary position. I know this is to be considered in 2023, but I'm yet to wait to see how we have traveled in the last 3 months, even how we adapted on the 24th of June budget. I sincerely thank the staff and their time taken to write and analyze this motion, but I hope to see once the one-page agreed report how we are traveling, and upon on that, in order that we have some confidence in our financial planning and for future Canning financial position, and at that time we could probably reconsider that. Even though I had lots of dream, we are going on a technological innovation world, but given our current financial position, I don't think it's more appropriate to be just appointing to do one part of an asset, but unless we should probably try and build that to the entire asset register and then bring it back as a better program for all of us. So that's my response to this. I'm not disrespecting the staff or officers who have done the work or written this report, but I'm as the leader elected by my people, I must take the responsibility and accountability that sometimes we have to wait. So we will wait to see that we progress in the better way. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Holland.
Mr Mayor, I'd like to hold mine back up until I hear other people and put mine later on, which I'm entitled to do.
If you'd like to do that, anyone
Thank
else wish to speak either for or against the matter? Councillor, any other councillor wish to speak either for or against the motion? Councillor Ponaturai has spoken against it. Councillor Spencer-Teo.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I agree with Councillor Ponaturai that although it was a good idea, we as a city are just not ready for this right now. Also, I think pointing people to our poor and average playgrounds is not really something that we want to be actively promoting. I think we should be spending that money on providing shade or new equipment in those playgrounds. So Not now, but maybe down the future when we have some funny money to throw around. Thank you.
Anyone else? Councillor Holland, you had your hand up. You now want to speak?
Yeah, I'll speak now, if that's all right. Thank you, Mr Mayor. Pardon me, I seconded the motion, so it got up because we're having a bit of trouble seeing to by getting a seconder. I think it's important that a motion is put up for debate, but I will speak against it. I've got several concerns on this. 103,000 to update the city's neighbourhood map. That includes updated park information that you can get readily available on Google Maps anyway. Allocation to upgrade park signage to include QR codes to support digital investment. It might sound funny considering I came back from a conference advocating for smart technology and smart city technology, but I can't agree with this at this present point in time. It's an allocation. It doesn't even have a dollar value on it. This is outside budget as well. We went through a full budgetary process, and this was not included. How we can include it now, I don't know. The budget is not as strong as we wanted it to be. We are in a process of a 3-year process now to get it back to being in the black. We hope to get that in the black within 3 years, I think the CEO said. This is certainly not going to help. It's something we don't need to spend the money on at this present point in time. Yeah, if we're flush with money, let's go onto the digital world. Do QR, I don't know whether I'd ever go to QR codes just on a park, but to go use it, enhance it, embrace it, yeah, but at the moment we've got other things that need more dire need of things, and one of them was just mentioned, shade cloth. I think it's a hell of a lot more important we've got a shade cloth over a playground than we've got a QR code there, so that we've got kids not getting cancer and things like this. I think our priorities, if we're going to go through with this, are just a bit skew-if. It does not have my support at all, this motion, and I hope my fellow councillors realise that, yes, we can bring this back at a later date, as was mentioned, without any hesitation, and I also realise that this is 22-23 budget. Let's address it after our financial situation is a little bit better than it is now. And we have done a lot more to enhance some of the, if you want to just say playgrounds, or even other things. Dog parks. There's a dog park in Willerton that hasn't got a water fountain. And that's a dog park. It's just a basic little water fountain that we could have put in there, that we can get 10 dog parks for this $100,000, or 10 water fountains for this, and God only knows how much the QR codes are going to cost, where we could have done a lot more. We can get another park put in. Priorities, right, parks are not everything, by the way, either. We could allocate it for other things. One of the things that we're thinking of doing now is the lighting. Changing lights, I think this is really the wrong time. I'll leave it at that. Thank you, Mr Mayor.
Thank you. Does anyone wish to speak in favour of the matter? We've had 3 speakers, including the mover and the seconder, speaking against it. Does anyone want to speak in favour of it? Does anyone really feel the need to speak against it again before we put the matter to the vote? Councillor Barry, you want to
Just quickly, I mean, I understand that what Councillor Holland was saying. I mean, I don't know about dogs. If you're going to go down there, I'll be searching for something for equality for poultry. But I think we covered most stuff at the AB in relation to this. And I suppose from my perspective, I think it was the Deputy Mayor, he put it quite succinctly, why don't we just Google it? And I think up until the time that we really need it, this is probably what we can do. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Porter.
Through you, Mr Mayor. With this one, I don't really agree with part 1, but part 2 I do support, so would it be possible to split this one to separate votes?
You want to support 2?
Yeah, but I don't want to support 1.
Well, in making the request to the Chair, I don't have any issue with that. If you'd like us to vote separately on there, I'm not certain how that would go, but yeah, let's do that. We'll vote separately on the 2. Councillor Sabiri, did you want something to add? I saw you. No? Councillor Spencer-Teo?
Do we have costings on just number 2?
Yeah, we don't. So there's no costings on number 2, so we'd be supporting a matter that we have no costing. We've got no idea how much that might cost. But nevertheless, we'll vote separately for them if you'd like us to do that. Councillor Kunza?
I just wanted to say in the report, it stipulated if we were to do all the signs, it would be approximately $372,600. I'm not sure whether that's indicating all the signs or not.
Okay, thank you, councillors. Look, I agree with every other speaker. I think I agree with Councillor Holland, particularly we're really at the moment we're at a time that we need to be really responsible with the money that we spend, and we really need to reel in non-essential spending. And I think right now all of us would believe, I'm sure, that this at the moment is not a spending that would be essential to the good governance of this council, or also to the running of the community. I'm sure there'll be an expectation on a wish list if things were completely different. Absolutely, I agree, but right now we need to be really careful with our spending. So I will be obviously voting against that matter. Does anyone wish to speak before we put the matter to the vote? And I will actually split the vote up at the request of Councillor Holland. Councillor Porter, I'm sorry. Councillor Porter?
After having the costing for the second one, I no longer want it split up, so we can skip that if you want.
Just vote.
Thank you, though.
Councillor Kunze, you've got your microphone on? No? Councillors, that being the case, there's no one, Councillor Ponatoro, you spoke against it. There's actually no one that spoke in favour of it, so I'm not sure how rebuttal works in that instance, but nevertheless, I think we may just put the matter to the vote. Thank you, councillors. No. Well, we haven't called the vote yet, so can we just re-vote, please, governance? So, councillors... No, you've already gotten old. Hang on, I think that might be another complaint.
Councillor, I'll reconvene the vote for item EN 017.
We'll call the vote, councillors. Can I say though, just on that, that's a good example, Councillor Holland, of legislation that doesn't take into account humour. So, you know, in the printed word, you take offence to that and bang, we've got a committee hearing about a breach of conduct because you've taken offence to it. And that's where we've gotten to. Well, not if it's dealt with at the meeting, but yeah. Thank you, councillors. The vote is that we have, council has resolved not to proceed with the matter. Governance, I'll get you to read the...
Motion EN-017-21 has been lost with all 11 voting against the motion.
Okay, thank you. We move to 13.5, the responsible officer being Dr. Sarah McQuaid to my left. The item is CO 006 of 21. The title of the report, Review Policy CM179 Community Engagement. The officer recommendation is that council adopts a revised community engagement policy, CM179 Attachment 1. The recommendation is on page 180 of the agenda and is on screen. A mover, please. Councillor Spencer-Teo, thank you. A seconder. Councillor Ponaturo, thank you. Councillor Spencer-Teo.
I'm in favour and I have nothing to add, thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Ponaturo.
I'm in favour, nothing to add, thank you.
Does anyone wish to speak against the matter before we put it to the vote? Thank you. In the absence of anybody speaking against the matter, we may just put that to the vote. We will. Thank you.
Motion CO 00621 has been carried, 10 in favour, noting Councillor Bain was absent for the vote.
Thank you. We have only one item left. That's just a notice of motion that I put to councillors. It's notice of motion 008 of 21, elect a member and chief executive officer reimbursement of expenses. The recommendation is on page 194 of the agenda and is on the screen. I'm the mover of the notice of motion. Can I just have a seconder, please, from the floor? Deputy Mayor? Not until I've spoken to it, you can't. I haven't introduced it. Seconder, please, from the floor. Councillor Spencer-Teo, thank you. Councillors, the reason why I've put this matter tonight is for a very simple reason, and that is there just seems to be, well, there is a glaring gap in our current policy. So I've learned of an incident recently where an elected member from another council may have made a significant claim of expenses after leaving office. I think that that is something that could occur at any council, and I'm yet to find a council that has a policy similar to ours, and I think it was just an inadvertent omission on our part. There is absolutely no requirement for councillors to actually put in a claim for an expense within a certain period of time. And so for people here, and look, many of the councillors here barely make a claim. In fact, we really don't, as a council, make a huge number of claims, and though over the last 4 or 5 years there have been thousands of dollars in claims, but I guess that's a small amount of what can be claimed. But the issue that I have here is that councillors that are in a position where they may have a term of office that is expiring, and this includes our CEO, of course, because our policy actually also covers the CEO. So for a CEO at the end of his term, who has chosen not during his term to avoid public scrutiny by not claiming mileage that he's entitled to, could, after his contract term, which could be 4 years or 8 years, or he could be a long-term CEO, may, upon his leaving the City of Canning, and this also applies equally to councillors, put in a very large claim and do it quite legally. So I think our role here is to manage the finances of the city, the finances of our ratepayers effectively and also responsibly, and this is not a reflection on anybody here around the table, including the CEO or any councillor. It's just that we have a glaring problem with this policy, and all I'm suggesting is that claims should be made, within 14 days of the expenditure actually being incurred. The city's supported I've spoken to the CEO and the officers. The city is supporting the motion, but they've recommended a far longer period of 2 months. And I've spoken to a number of councillors, mayors over the last 2 days, including the Mayor of Victoria Park, who also has a 60-day claim, because sometimes it takes a little while to get those claims organised. Sometimes you may have to go to your bank to get evidence of a claim, or a statutory declaration may be required. So I'm happy to amend that. If anybody would like to amend that, I would support that. But I think as a council, our community would be looking at this and worried that there is a strong risk from a risk management point of view that any of us, including myself or our Chief Executive Officer, who is covered by this policy, may, upon leaving the City of Canning, put in a significant claim, and I just don't think that is proper. I think it's inappropriate. So I think we just need to close that gap. Councillor Sweeney.
Yeah, I'm glad you raised it, Mr Mayor, because
Have you got a question?
Well, I was just going to ask you about the amendment.
Yeah, of course.
It sounded that you raised it, whether or not is this the relevant time to make that suggestion for the amendment?
I've just got to let Councillor Spencer speak to them as a seconder, and then I'll come back to you with an amendment. Or, actually, I'll tell you what, I'll take the amendment if you'd like. Yeah, I can.
He's got to ask the seconders.
Oh. I will ask for... Can I ask... Let's do it the other way. Let's ask the seconder to make her amendment, and if you would like to agree to it, or...
Yeah, look, mine's simply about the turnaround time.
Okay.
That's all. It's the 14 days I just think is unreasonable. I think if we stretch that out to, say, 2 months, I think that's...
60 days?
That's what I'm looking at, yeah.
Okay. Can I ask the seconder, Councillor Spencer Teo, would you support 60 days in
I was
lieu of 14 days?
going to say 30, but it might be a bit harsh, but okay, I'm happy to accept 60.
It's not changing the intent of the notice of motion. I'm happy to accept that as a minor amendment. It'll go from 14 days to 60 days, which seems a reasonable period for one to put in a claim for an expense. Councillor Spencer Teo, I'll invite you to actually speak to the matter.
Thank you. Mr Mayor, I agree with the rationale behind this motion. We all keep throwing around these words accountability and transparency. Well, here's an opportunity to actually put this into practice. We need to be accountable and transparent while we're elected and not after the fact. So I support this. Thank you.
Councillor Deputy Mayor.
Can I make a move to adjourn it to the December meeting 2021? Procedural motion.
The Deputy Mayor has raised a procedural motion. I'll just get governance to type that up. You can have a seconder for the procedural motion, please. Councillor Barry. Deputy Mayor, would you like to explain to the room why we can't make a decision on this tonight?
Simply a few things. 3 points I've written down. 1, it's an election cycle. 2, we need more time to consider. And 3, possibly workshop it. It might be something we might want to do more than just put in a day component.
Thank you. We'll put the matter to the vote. Oh, hang on. Stand by for a moment. Deputy Mayor, you've already adjourned one matter tonight. You seconded one. So if you're a mover or a seconder of a procedural motion, you can't in the same meeting move or second a second procedural motion.
What do you suggest a potential solution and workaround would this be, Mr Mayor? Someone else can do it?
Potential workaround, that's the standing orders. So you're unable to do it. Does anyone else wish to speak to this matter? Councillor Barry.
I'll move it just to see where it goes, thank you. The procedural motion.
We'll need a seconder for that. There's no seconder, the motion lapses. Councillor Ponaturai is seconding it. Councillors, put the matter to the vote. Councillor Holland, do you have a question?
Yeah, just a question. Sorry, Mr Mayor, just a question.
Yeah, microphone, sorry, it didn't go on.
Tricky, this one tonight. Just a question, should Councillor Barry be speaking to this before it goes?
Well, he's chosen not to. He just said, I want to see where it goes. And
yeah, yep, okay.
Did you want to speak to the matter, Councillor Barry, and explain why you think the matter can't be dealt with
Just
tonight?
to reiterate, I mean, just from the point of view of what the Deputy Mayor said, thank you.
Councillor Ponaturai, unless you've got a question, I can't hear you. You can only ask a question. It's a procedural motion. Let's put the matter to the vote, councillors.
Procedural motion to adjourn item non 00821 has been carried. 6 in favour, 5 against. Those councillors voting against the procedural motion is the Mayor, Councillors Bain, Kunzar, Sabiri and Spencer Teo.
Thank you, councillors. We have already dealt with the second notice of motion tonight. The last item, I think, is, let me see, is urgent business at item 15. There is no urgent business this evening. At item 16, confidential matters, there are none on the agenda this evening. At item 17, closure. Trudy? At closure, there being no further business, I now declare the meeting closed. The time being now 8:30 p.m. On the dot. Councillors, the gallery has disappeared. I thank you for your attendance tonight. The meeting is concluded. Thank you.